because I hadn't really considered it. So there's 100 million holders now. You figure it won't be long, theoretically, until there's 1 billion holders. And the global nature of who they would be is what hit me, because everybody's going to have a phone eventually. It doesn't matter where you are. You're going to have a phone, probably. You can afford that in every country of the world, most people. So you could have people saving where they had no other way to save. You could have people in countries where the inflation rate is 1,000% on their currencies, and they could be saving on their phone using Bitcoin, and there could be 1 billion hodlers at some point. And I hadn't even considered how powerful that is for people that don't have access to that now.
Look, the story here that's not being told is that Bitcoin is egalitarian progressive technology. We're going to see a day when 7 to 8 billion people have a bar of digital gold on their phone, and they're using it to store their life savings with it. Google took 22 years to become $1 trillion network. You know, Amazon took 24 years. Apple took 42 years. Microsoft took 44 years. Bitcoin became $1 trillion digital monetary network in 12 years. And so the world needs this thing. And I think you can expect that we'll have 1 billion people storing their value, in essence, a savings account on a mobile device within 5 years. And they're going to want to use something like Bitcoin. Bitcoin is the dominant digital monetary network.
Well, hey there, freaks. It's Matt Odell here for another episode of Citadel Dispatch. This is episode 10. On the backs of a bloody day in the markets with Bitcoin price down double digits. Well, we're here to talk about more than just price on Citadel Dispatch. I'm here with Craig Raw, an econo alchemist, and we're going to be talking about Bitcoin self-custody, security, and privacy. It's come to my attention that a lot of people in the new class of Bitcoiners do not realize the gravity of the custodial risk that they face when they use these custodial products. I don't think that established Bitcoiners realize how much education needs to be placed in terms of talking about why self-custody is important and making it easier for people to use self-custody and helping with that education effort as well. Tomorrow, I will be doing a live stream with Pete Rizzo with Bitcoin Magazine for the anniversary of Mt. Gox. 7 years ago, Mt. Gox went down, and a lot of people lost a lot of Bitcoin that is worth a lot more today than it was back then. That probably wish that they, practiced self-custody at the time. So definitely go and check that out. As for our guests here today, by the way, shout out to all the freaks that are joining us here live in the chat. I love our Bitcoin Tuesdays together, so cheers to you. Our guests here today are Craig Raw. Craig Raw is the lead maintainer of Sparrow Wallet, a wallet that frankly came out of nowhere and blew me away and others away. We haven't really heard him much on any of the podcasts. I don't think he's ever been on the podcast. So I'm pretty excited to have this conversation. And we're also joined by Econo Alchemist, who is more focused on content and guides and blowing things up and lighting things on fire. And his videos are just really exciting. And he focuses a lot on no KYC, running at home for no KYC. And I just think we're going to have a really great conversation here. So with that said, let's start with you, Craig. Did I miss anything?
No, thanks, Matt. Honored to be on the show. As you say, this is my first pod, so yeah, I'm really keen to get into it and talk Bitcoin.
Awesome. What's up, Eco?
Good afternoon. It is a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me on. And like you, I was also blown away the first time I used Sparrow Wallet. So I'm very excited to be having this discussion. And yeah, let's dive in.
Fuck yes. So, I mean, I like to let's just go right off the bat, you know. First of all the freaks in the comments, you know the deal. We got the Evil Empire price on top. That's the Coinbase Pro price. Underneath, we have the BISC price. I forgot to mention for the listeners who are coming in through the podcast feed, that was in the beginning, that was CNBC. That was our boy Joe Kern talking to Michael Saylor of MicroStrategy about Bitcoin as the price was dumping. So you see the price dump there. He has as much conviction as he always has, which is way more than most people. So yeah, so let's just jump in. Let's just jump into this. Sparrow Wallet. What was the inspiration for Sparrow? I feel like you kind of just came out of nowhere, Craig, and give a why Sparrow and why should people consider using it?
Yeah. I think that there have been a lot of sort of iterations in the Bitcoin world in terms of securing and storing your Bitcoin, your stash. And, I think if we go back, it goes back a long way, but I'm just going to start with, the first hardware wallets, Trezor coming out. I mean, clearly that was something has changed, the way that we see things. And, we've had many great hardware wallets since. Then after that, I think, we've got multi-sig, which again, just, really makes things so much more secure, and you can really just do, you have to worry about a lot less. And then sort of towards the end of, I'm not sure if it was about a year ago, I was just listening to Michael Flaxman on the Stefan Livera pod, and he was talking about multi-vendor multi-sig, and for me that really just seemed like almost the next step up. So I was quite inspired to give it a go, and the only real tool we had at the time was to use Electrum, and it wasn't easy. It was it was a real difficult journey, and I had to write some code to do it, and it was just the whole thing just left me feeling pretty uncertain about being able to reproduce this or explain this to other people. And I just felt that there was a gap in the market for that. So, it was really just driven by the idea of, having done this for myself and kind of wanting to make it easier for others, and frankly, wanting to make it easier for myself to do in future, and less kind of prone to, making mistakes because I've typed something wrong on the command line or whatever. So that's kind of where I began. It was around a year ago that I began to write, and it's just been a great journey. I've been wanting to get into the Bitcoin world for 7-8 years now. Just been like most of the freaks, just consuming Bitcoin content every day, just living in that world. With a day job that, takes up my time, but just really just wanting to spend more time on it. And I finally got the chance to do that. And it was just a great journey to kind of go into it and fully get into all of the concepts and kind of make it happen. It's largely about trying to provide freaks with the ability to really self-store their stash, to really be sovereign over it. That's what Sparrow's mission is, and that's what I'm keen to keep going down the road on. So that's, yeah.
So you made an interesting point there. I mean, as a Bitcoiner, as a public Bitcoiner focused on education, we talked a lot about multi-sig. I talk a lot about self-custody, trying to improve people's custody. And a lot of us, I feel like, hit the same wall about And I wouldn't be surprised if Econ Alchemist is the same with him. We hit the same wall like 2 years ago. I was like, Electrum's the best thing there is available. It's too complicated to use. It requires you to set up an Electrum personal server, and if you want to use your own node with it. And that is too complicated for people to use. And I don't want to say too complicated in like the no corner, or like the Peter McCormick sense or something like that, but just in the sense that you want to reduce the friction of best practices as much as possible. Like you can, personal responsibility will always be the more difficult option. People that want no responsibility whatsoever, like, yeah, that'll always be more convenient. That'll always be easier. But we can make it so that best practices with personal responsibility is as frictionless as possible, as easy as possible. And so I feel like a bunch of us all hit the same point. Since then, there's been a couple big ones that have released. I would say the three big ones, at least in the desktop world, were Caravan, and then Spectre, Sparrow with you, and then in the mobile world, Blue Wallet, has come like a really far way. And I feel like they all try to address the same issue where you have this super powerful Electrum, but it's just really complicated for individuals to use. Now, Spectre has gotten a lot of love, and especially for me as well, I use Spectre. I recommend Spectre. Spectre decided, we're going to completely take away the need for an Electrum personal server. So we completely remove Electrum from the equation. You run Bitcoin Core either locally or on a remote machine, and then you connect directly to Bitcoin Core through the Spectre interface. And Spectre kind of like hides a lot of things from you. It's almost to make it user friendly. This like clean, like new age type of interface. With Sparrow, you kind of did two things. First of all, you can still use it as just an Electrum front end with the typical Electrum backends. You recently added the support for Core, but it's almost like a different. It's super performant. It has all of these, power user features, but it kind of, and it has a beautiful interface. Like, it looks gorgeous. I put it up on the screen. Like, look at this thing. It looks gorgeous, but you can't say it's not. It expects a lot of its user. It expects more of its user than a Spectre. What do you think of that of that breakdown?
Yeah, I kind of agree. When you had NVK Rodolfo on 2 weeks back, he said something which I really agree with. He said, you don't get to avoid the need to understand things. You don't, as a Bitcoiner, take self-custody and self-responsibility over your wealth and then just kind of somehow expect to have it all work out fine if you don't put any effort in. And I think that that's something that I really believe in. I understand that might not be a view that's held by everyone, but I kind of want Sparrow to be the application for those people who really want to need to know what is going on under the hood. So, let's go all the way to the fact that I show by default the actual hex code of the transaction that you're about to send out. Why did I do that? Well, it's because, let's imagine, for example, that you are looking after your family's wealth and you've got it sitting in 1 or 2 or 3 UTXOs, and you need to, let's say that Taproot is activated and you want to sweep those UTXOs into your brand new Taproot wallet to take advantage of all the great new features that's coming. Now, when you have to send that transaction with your family's wealth in it, that's a high stress moment for any Bitcoin coiner. And for me, that was really what I was kind of being driven by, was how do I reduce that high stress? How do I take the stress out of that? And you can, if you want to, just put your trust in the wallet and say, you know what, I think this wallet has done me well thus far, and I'm just going to click the button. But for me, that wasn't enough. And I kind of wanted to build a wallet that allows people who are paranoid, who are just like, I have to make sure that this goes right, because there is no backup if I make a mistake. And that's the kind of user that Sparrow is really designed for.
Yeah, I mean,
I agree
like, first,
100%.
oh, awesome. Yeah, I want to hear
Yeah.
Eco. What do you think here?
Well, yeah, I mean, first, just to go back a little bit, Electrum, I had a lot of trouble with that. I've used it a little bit for doing some PSBT signing or generating the PSBT and then signing with my cold card, but I've never implemented it successfully. So when I had the chance to set Sparrow up with my Raspberry Pi running Bitcoin Core, yeah, dude, it just worked, and it was really beautifully done. And to what Craig was just saying about that high stress moment, like, yeah, like if I'm sending a lot of value with Bitcoin, like I pore over every detail multiple times, and it takes me like an hour and a half to do a single transaction, just because I know if I fuck it up, that's it. And that's part of that radical responsibility you got to take when you're responsible for your wealth like that. And so I really appreciate developers like Craig who think about that and implement those improvements for the end user. And one other thing I wanted to say too is that I think a lot of great projects come up because the developers are trying to build the tools that they want to use. Samurai Wallet's a good example, and like you were saying, Craig, with Sparrow Wallet, I think some of the best tools we've seen have come from people who are just making something that they wanted.
So, freaks, I am currently staying in a cabin in the woods, and my internet connection has a lot of latency. So, I apologize ahead of time if I talk over anyone or if they talk over me. We needed to get this must go on. So, here we are. So, yeah, I mean, I 100% agree, Eco. Like, I think, especially with open source software, what you do see is the best software is the one that's being built by people who want to use it themselves. It's the ultimate incentive. I want to make something really clear to the freaks. It's really important that we have multiple projects that are good projects, that are well-run projects that are good, because if we have multiple, it allows you to verify against each other if you do not have the wherewithal to actually verify the code base. So a perfect example is if you're running a Spectre stack or an Electrum stack, and then you also verify on a separate computer that is running Sparrow. And also, just in general, it's just good for people to have options. I want people to have as many options as possible. So I just want to go back a little bit. We can get like deeper into the Sparrow conversation. I think we should. I also want to talk a lot about Samurai because Eco just released a bunch of guides about Samurai's collaborative spends. But before we do that, so Craig, like you really impressed me. Like I feel like you're a very underappreciated Bitcoiner. I just wanted to say I appreciate you. Thank you for Sparrow Wallet. It caught me off guard, and I pay a fucking ton of attention in the space. And it just literally completely blindsided me in like the best way possible. So cheers to that. And I think you have very interesting takes. So I want to hear for the freaks, especially the new freaks that might be joining us, the relatively new Bitcoiners, explain to them why it is so fucking important that they don't leave their Bitcoin on the exchange they bought it on, or put it into like a BlockFi custodial, like KYC product. Like, why should they care enough to hold their own keys?
Well, I mean, if you don't hold your own keys, you just have an IOU, right? Which is all that you really have in the fiat world anyway, right? You just have this IOU from the bank. And frankly, if you're looking at an exchange, they're not even governed by the same regulations that banks are. So you have even less guarantees around that particular IOU. And, you have the capability with Bitcoin to bypass that. And in the fiat world, you don't, unless you take it out in cash. And in India, that didn't really work. So, you know, you have this incredible tool, and, you know, to not hold it in your own keys, to not take custody of it and take advantage of all of the advantages that gives you, of being able to travel with it anywhere in the world, of being able to hold on to it through whatever, so long as you don't make any mistakes. You know, I think that it's a trade-off, but I think it's one that's really worth taking. And to not take it, or not even start going down that road and trying to learn more, I think is a huge mistake. So that's kind of how I see it. Is, you know, it's a journey, and I know that it scares a lot of people off, and they, you know, really are looking at it and thinking there's so much to understand here, it's just beyond me. But it's honestly not. You know, these tools are getting easier all the time, and you don't need to go all the way to, you know, the sort of golden class of multi-vendor, multi-sig. You can get there. You can take your time and you know, just start that journey. That's my kind of message, is to at least make an attempt and begin and learn, and then when you're ready, start getting your coins off the exchange.
I mean, but that's very well said. But I mean, I'm so extremely on the opposite side of custodial risk. Like, it's so against everything that Bitcoin is. I kind of, you know, I feel like sometimes, especially our conversations that we have here on Dispatch, and we have on RHR, and we have on TFTC, and Stefan has on his podcast, and we have on Twitter and shit. Like, we overwhelm people. They think they have to be too complicated. You know, as you and Nico were saying earlier, that you want to double check every single thing before you send it. I almost, like, even if I was like an uneducated, like a fresh but motivated user, just like immediately pull it out to a mobile wallet. Is that, would you like I almost like, I'd rather hot wallet risk than custodial risk. Am I at, you know, is my priorities misplaced here?
No, completely agree with you.
Yeah, 100%. Get it off the exchange.
Exactly. So so this is a perfect example to jump into it, Eco, because of your work with Samurai Wallet and making guides for Samurai Wallet. Like, Samurai Wallet is designed to be a very user-friendly wallet. And, you know, is it as secure for, you know, if you want to do like long-term, high-value cold storage with, you know, multi-sig, multi-vendor, you know, using an air-gapped computer as well. You know, these are all additional things you could take. But if just the average user is using something like Samurai Wallet, Hot Wallet on their phone, it's very accessible. Wouldn't you agree?
Dude, 100%. Yeah, I use Samurai Wallet all the time on my Android. I use Blue Wallet on my iPhone. Dude, and yeah, I've got substantial amounts of value on both of those wallets. You know, I like to use cold storage just as much as the next person, but, you know, I think people discredit how secure that really is. I mean, with SHA-256 encryption, you're getting like military grade security by default. And I think people kind of freak themselves out because they're like, oh, I need to run my own node before I self custody. I need to like get a multi-sig set up, and they just kind of freak themselves out and end up not doing anything, which is probably the worst decision they can make. You know, like, get the coins off an exchange, set up a mobile wallet, start with small amounts until you get more and more comfortable with it, and just start building from there. It doesn't have to be overly complicated. And, you know, one of my arguments, and I'm sure some holes can be poked in this, but like, everyone knows where Satoshi Nakamoto's mining rewards were deposited to. Those aren't in a multi-sig wallet, and no one has cracked that code. Like, it's totally secure there. You don't have to go so far as to get all these different hardware wallets and set up multi-sig to have really great security. But
And
start small.
if I can just add to that, you know, there's one, I think, advantage of advising people to go and buy a hardware wallet, and it's got nothing to do with security that a hardware wallet offers. It has to do with the sort of human psychology of going out there and spending, you know, some money, and it's, you know, not cheap for most people in this world. You just take the whole thing a little bit more seriously. You know, I think that the by far the highest chance that any Bitcoiner has of losing their Bitcoin is just, you know, their own sort of ability to lose keys or lose phones or whatever it is. And I just kind of like the idea that if you've spent the money on the hardware wallets, you know, you've kind of made an investment in your mind, and now you're sort of taking the whole self-custody thing a little bit more seriously. You know, you've got something you need to look after that's kind of unique in your world. So anyway, it's just a thought.
Yeah, I like that. And I think that, you know, for myself personally, I definitely did find some security in the idea of having an air gap device. But I think over time, as I understood how things worked a little bit better, I was more and more comfortable with the idea of having larger amounts of funds on a mobile phone. And I feel totally fine with it now. I'm confident with that setup.
So there's a couple of things to unpack here. First of all, you misspoke briefly there. You said SHA-256. It's AS-256 encryption usually, but that doesn't really matter. It's important that all important data should be encrypted. You know, it makes it more secure. But when we talk about hot wallet risk, what we're really talking about is the risk is that it's on an online device, and that device, either the app itself that you're using could receive a malicious update, or the software that it's running on top of could receive some kind of malicious update, right? And you come in, you know, an attacker comes in and compromise that underlying system, and then they trick you into either, you know, sending a transaction, or they just, you know, pull out your funds, or they like keylog you and wait till you put in your passphrase or something like that to take your funds. So that's the risk. You know, the risk is probably often overstated. I mean, if you talk about compared to custodial, if you could talk about compared to custodial risk, you already have, the hacker already has your funds, right? They're the exchange. Like you don't have the funds yet. So when you compare it to custodial risk, I think it's substantially less risk. It's one of those things that, like, we have, yes, if you have a compromised, you know, mobile wallet, then you could have funds stolen. We have never seen a major hack to happen on any of these, you know, respected mobile wallets in the history of Bitcoin. That doesn't mean it won't happen, but we haven't. We've seen tons of exchange closers, hacks. We've seen people get their accounts closed and stuff. So I think it's a significant step improvement. In practice, what does a hardware wallet help with? An air gap help with? Air gap specifically helps with the fact that the attacker needs to get access to the device, usually, or the air-gapped computer. It's not connected to the internet. So, you know, even if you're the dumbest computer user ever, you know, if it's not connected to the internet, they probably have to come into your home or your office or whatever to compromise you. The exception to that rule is twofold: the software that you use, and if you update the hardware wallet, which is why it's important that people learn how to verify things, but they don't, you know, people don't. So it is what it is, but that is there. You still have that attack vector there. Now, how does a hardware wallet help there? What really helps, I've noticed, is with Cold Card. And I've just decided, I used to say, you know, use a Trezor or Ledger if you're a new user, and then move up to Cold Card. I've decided that people should just go straight to Cold Card. Fuck it. If you're going to use a hardware wallet, use Cold Card. The idea is, instead of setting up a clean computer that is air gapped and you don't think is compromised, which is a very difficult thing for people to do, the cold card acts as your air-gapped device, as your air-gapped computer. It's a purpose-built small little computer. Now, if you use that, they don't make their own software. So if you use that with Sparrow and you're verifying everything that's happening on the cold card screen, and you're verifying everything that's happening on Sparrow on your computer, then you're essentially creating a situation, right, where you need an attacker has to compromise both. They have to compromise both the cold cards update mechanism, and they have to compromise Sparrow wallet to display it incorrectly. So you add that by adding that second, that combination attack, attackers will just go for the lowest hanging fruit. And that's what we see, right? We see in practice. We can talk all day about all this shit. And in practice, what happens? In practice, the attackers just, get people, they trick people into just putting their seed into a web page.
Yeah. Sorry for misspeaking about that encryption. But I do see your point, and I agree. I think they do go after low hanging fruit and get people to make critical mistakes like that. I guess maybe I did downplay the risk a little bit with the hot device. I do feel comfortable with it though, and
I think that one of the sorry, Matt.
No, go. I want to hear your take, Craig. Hit us.
I think one of the difficulties, that we have is that when we talk about these things, there's such a wide audience. We've got people who are literally coming in having never considered holding Bitcoin, and last week they bought their first stats. And then you've got people in the audience who have been doing this for 5, 6, 7 years and just kind of know everything. I mean, that's a huge range of people that to talk to. So it's really hard to kind of say, well, there's this vulnerability, or there's this approach, or that approach. I mean, my sort of view is, if you've just bought and you've managed to get your coins off the exchange, you're doing great. Well done. Pat yourself on the back. All of the people, all of the talk around the things that can go wrong, that's all very valid. You shouldn't completely ignore it, but don't let it put you off. Don't let it sort of throw you off the trail of figuring out how to make yourself more secure. The second thing is, you kind of know in your own gut when you need to upgrade your how secure your setup is. If you're lying awake thinking to yourself, well, that hot wallet, it's kind of, the price has gone up, I'm not too sure whether that's a safe place for me anymore. You kind of have that feel yourself, and you should listen to that, and you should let that drive you to do more education, and then finally choose something which is better. But don't rush into anything. Take your time. Educate yourself. It's very unlikely that whatever you have today is going to fall over tomorrow. So it's almost sort of a peace of mind thing. If you're battling to sleep at night or whatever because you're holding too much value in a setup that you don't feel is all that secure anymore, that's the time to kind of start working on it, I think.
I think that's solid advice.
And yeah, that is fantastic advice, and that's why I wanted you on the show so badly. I think the other thing people I don't want you, Eco, to, I didn't mean to, you shouldn't. Hot wallets have a place, and they are, in practice, especially if you verify your software releases and you check on, to make sure that it's actually the release that the developer has released. And in that case, you're still trusting the developer, but you're checking that a malicious entity hasn't stepped in between you and the developer and given you a bad copy of the software, are significantly more secure than people lead them to believe. And especially if you're going to use something like Lightning or CoinJoin, you have no choice. You're going to be using a hot wallet for that. And people get very, very scared about that. But I personally have had significant funds in hot wallet in Whirlpool's liquidity pool, in Whirlpool's privacy pool. And right now, if you look at Clark Moody's dashboard, what is it? It's like a 2,000 Bitcoin right now or something like that. And then if you talk about on the Lightning side, it's like at the public capacity is like at 1,000 Bitcoin or something like that. So those are Bitcoins that we know for sure are in hot wallets, and they haven't been compromised yet. So there's something to be said there, right?
Yeah, I think so. And I think the bigger point is that you're taking more risk by keeping your coins in someone else's possession. You're now subject to their permission, and you're at a much greater risk of being censored. That's just a way more precarious situation to be in than to have your funds in a hot wallet, I think. At least with the hot wallet, it's like you're responsible for that, and if anything goes wrong, it's most likely your fault. And I think that's what a lot of people need to come to terms with is taking that radical responsibility and just understanding, like, if you get tricked, like, yeah, that sucks, but really it's your fault for typing that mnemonic phrase into the computer. And like, you just got to take responsibility and understand what you're doing. And I highly recommend just starting with small amounts and working your way up until you're more comfortable with this stuff and understand it better.
Yeah, that's very good advice, for sure. And you should always, if you have a new setup of any kind, just test it with a few small amounts. Send some transactions in, send some transactions out, check everything. I think the best advice is just to take some time to, move any significant value to it. Don't rush into it, because the more you can learn, the safer you'll be.
Yeah, absolutely.
I like what, so this is also a 6102 show because he refuses. So we get about that, Craig. 6102 thinks that you're a failure in Nimland because we're hearing your voice right now, and he refuses to dox his voice. So this is also 6102's show because he joins us live in the chat to hit us with questions and comments. And one thing he mentioned here is a simple thing you can do is just use multiple different types of wallets, right? And even if they're not multi-sig, if they're single sig, different types of wallets, the chances that you lose everything are greatly diminished because you would need multiple wallets to get screwed.
Yeah, sure. But we can certainly talk about what it is to what the right choices are for those getting into it. But I think if we were to zoom out a bit and we see where we all believe Bitcoin is likely to go in terms of value, I do think there's value in having discussion now about more advanced stuff. And it's not intended to put people off, but I do think we need to get into what does ideal cold storage look like, and how do we move forward on that goal? Because it could end up being that we all holding significant value, on a level that we can't even really sort of imagine today. And how are we going to do that? At that stage, a hot wallet is not going to be the right thing. How are we going to protect ourselves against physical attacks? Those are the kind of things that I spend a lot of time thinking about. Again, we're talking to a very broad audience here, but I'd like to spend some time on that because I do think we need to at least talk about it so we can end up in the right place at some point further down the path.
100%, Craig. This is why I brought you on. I think in Bitcoin land, it's important to be an adversarial thinker. In general, I think a lot of shitcoiners miss that. Naivety is a liability in this industry. And I appreciated when you reached out to me saying I wasn't being adversarial enough, which is always a good sign. So I mean, what I wanted to do there was I really wanted to unpack it for the freaks and go back, and then we come back. So now we're here. I have a feeling what we're about to talk about is multi-vendor, multi-sig, and I want you to just let's go. Well, what do you think is the ideal path here? What are freaks looking at? I think one thing people don't realize is they like kind of realize it, but they don't put two and two together. Most of us, I know myself, I'm going to get both of you on the record whether or not you think Bitcoin's designed to pump forever. I mean, I think we think Bitcoin's going to go up significantly in value. And I think if you've been here for even a tiny bit, you realize that happens way at a large, quicker pace and at a larger scale than you could ever fathom. So one thing that NVK often says is, treat it like 10x of what it's currently. And I think even more than that. We talked about Gox earlier, and I'm going to have that live stream tomorrow about Gox. Like, those people, they lost their coins at $800 a coin. Even the most bullish people couldn't fathom that it was going to be $50,000. That was going to be $48,000, and people were going to be scared that it was dumping, right? So like they couldn't fathom that shit, and that's how we have to think about security going forward. So let's jump in here, Craig. This is why I wanted you on the show.
Cool. Yeah. So I mean, look, as I was saying earlier, I do think that multi-vendor, multi-sig is currently the best you can do in a sort of general sense. I mean, there's always other ways to kind of look at things, but I think that that's going to be the most common path for people to kind of achieve the best cold storage that they can. Very briefly, why multi-vendor? It's really because if there is a vulnerability in any specific vendor's product, there's going to have to be something that can be exploited in the other vendor's product at the same time. And the chances of this sort of multiplicative experience or kind of event happening is really so low that you can almost rule that sort of out. So it sort of allows you to worry so much less about which vendor I'm using, and is Trezor, can you put it into a little box and get the secrets out, or is Ledger closed source? All of these things suddenly fade into the background because all of a sudden you're now just looking at, have to find a way to exploit your treasure and your cold card at the same time. And there's just almost zero chance that that's ever going to happen. It's already very hard to do one. To do two is, you just multiply those two chances together and you end up with an extremely small number. So that's really the basis of why that is, I think, the best way to get to, really good cold storage. In terms of the physical attack side of things, I'm going to dox myself even more here and say that I live in South Africa, which is one of the the highest crime rates in the world. So that's obviously not a good thing, but the one good thing that it is just that everyone lives here with this really sort of adversarial thinking in terms of physical attack. And one of the best ways you can avoid that as a Bitcoin coiner, and I saw someone say it in the comments now, is really just making sure that your devices are spread over a large area, so that you have to travel to those areas, that it takes time to get there, and that hopefully you can pass through some security checkpoints on the way. And I think that that's a really important thing. It certainly makes my life feel better that I'm not sitting there wondering if someone's going to knock on my door with a gun and say, I'm going to, do something really bad to you or your wife if you don't hand over your keys. So for me, that's pretty important. And I think it's a little bit under-recognized in the Bitcoin world today. I think that maybe it's just a point of view that I sort of have because of where I live, but I can't see how it doesn't become a bigger threat as Bitcoin grows. And you might say, well, I'm making sure that I'm never doxing myself, and my address is always, and that's great. You should do that. But at some point, there's going to be so many holders of Bitcoin, and it's going to be such an easy or sort of the easiest way to walk out of your home with the most value, that I think that, you know, there will come a point in future where these kind of thoughts become fairly important. So that's kind of my brief why multi-vendor, multi-sig.
Let's forget multi-vendor for a second. The single biggest benefit of multi-sig is physical attacks, right?
Agreed.
Okay. 100% massive improvement there that doesn't exist for anything non-Bitcoin related. I mean, if we talk about what people don't realize is when self-custody was big back in the Wild West days, like stagecoaches were getting robbed all the fucking time. You know, banks were getting robbed until just relatively recently. So now if you're your own bank, you have to deal with that. Now, Craig, one thing I would mention is I think one of the reasons we don't hear more about it is because we have a lot of Bitcoiners in America. In America, we have, you know, relatively low crime rates and high gun ownership. So that kind of mitigates it a tiny bit. But I mean, multi-sig takes it to a whole nother fucking level. And it's actually even bigger than just multi-sig. Really, as a community, we need to make multi-sig the expected standard. It's almost like because the attacker, if the attacker's already in your home and they're like, you know, torturing you or like fucking you up, and they have a gun to your head, they might not. They're that crazy person or that motivated person might not, you know, believe you at the time, right? It's like the alarm systems when you have something outside that says, you know, I own a dog or I have this alarm system. There's I'm going to trigger a lot of people. There's a herd immunity in multi-sig. If the industry standard becomes multi-sig, people won't even think about trying because they'll just assume that any average Bitcoiner is going to be using multi-sig. Would you agree?
Completely, yeah. So that's kind of where I want things to go. I know that they're not there today, and I certainly don't try and get anybody new into the space to do that. But I do think we need to talk about it because, you know, it's something that's brought immense peace of mind to my own life. So, you know, I just want others to kind of share in that, and you know, it's something you should work towards. I think it's not that hard to do. It's not that expensive to do, and you know, you should really just make sure that your home is not like the complete answer to your kind of personal wealth. It's not where you store everything, because it just makes you way too big a target. And you know, there are some unpleasant people out there in the world who will take advantage of it. It really, I think, is just a matter of time before it becomes a bigger thing.
Okay, so one thing we talk about on the show a lot, if you've listened in the past, is this idea that I say self-sovereign multi-sig. It was about 4 months ago. I said it's about 6 months away, like easy self-sovereign multi-sig. And I think there's a couple different concerns that people have here. So unquestionably, if all you care about is physical attacks, it's a significant improvement, no doubt about it. 100% do it. When I say self-sovereign multi-sig, I'm differentiating from Unchained Capital or Casa, where they host a key for you and your pub keys for you, because in that case you're giving up your privacy, and in that case, not only there's a level of trust that you're giving to them, you're 100% trusting them with your privacy, and because you're trusting them with your privacy, your balances, your transactions, it can make you more prone to physical attack in the future if they get hacked, or if they get compelled to release it to governments, and then the government gets hacked. There's all different, you know, your private information is out there. So I think it doesn't reduce as it does help in certain threat models, and everyone has different threat models, but it doesn't help as much. Now, the two main concerns about multi-sig, and we're seeing some of them in the comments. The first one is backing up is a little bit more complex. I would push back against that. I mean, basically what it means in practice is you need to have this additional backup file, and that backup file is a privacy risk. You might as well keep that with each key. And if you keep that extra file with each key, then you're good to go. That extra backup information. You're already backing up one piece of information. You back up an additional piece of information. You put that with each seed. That's not a or each hardware wallet. That's not a really as complicated as people might make it seem. Now, I think the real concern about multi-sig right now is the lack of standards between hardware wallets. And because of the lack of standards between hardware wallets, they're not able to communicate effectively the information they need to communicate to verify against each other. So if you're using like a single sig cold card, it's an easy standard process to verify your receive addresses, your change addresses, and stuff on screen. If you're using multi-vendor, multi-sig, I think right now in practice you can't verify any kind of information on the individual hardware wallet screens. Am I right that this is basically the biggest pain point we're sitting at right now in this ideal setup?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's absolutely right. We definitely need to make some ground there, and it's frustrating to me, and I'm sure all of the freaks that these guys. It's not that hard to do. It's really not. Like, we have standards like the Bitcoin Core output descriptors now, which really make this sort of stuff easy. And I just think we need, as customers of these companies, we need to put pressure on them to kind of add these key features that we need, because you're absolutely right, Matt. These are things that are currently very hard to do. For instance, in HWI, which is the library behind the scenes that talks via USB to your sort of Trezor or whatever, the multi-sig display address command, it just doesn't really work. And the lead maintainer of that, Andrew Chow, he's just said, it's just super hard to get this to work. So, it's stuff that is not hard for them to do. I really just feel that more people need to ask for it.
I mean, I would just add there that like even stuff like PSBTs, partially signed Bitcoin transactions, which have now basically become a standard, that's like relatively new, and it's because NVK like at Cold Card started pushing for it. So just with everything else, like we've made a lot of progress. I also saw in the comments, I did forget to mention Nunchuck. I mean, between these open source wallets, Sparrow, Spectre, Nunchuck, Blue Wallet, Caravan, and these new standards that are like coming around, like it feels really bullish. I feel like the industry is coming together. I wish they came together a little bit quicker, but they are coming together on this idea that instead of being a hardware wallet manufacturer, you're just manufacturing a key, like a signer device of a broader wallet, right?
Yeah, agreed.
And yeah. It's almost like you as an open source dev, like there's no business model for Sparrow, right? Like you come to you know that you're never going to make money from this thing, right?
I do. I'm actually fine with that, Matt. I've kind of been in the commercial game my whole life, and it's really refreshing to just do something with a pure sort of mission to it, and that gets me up every day. I can't argue, just to go on a tangent for that. I can't tell anyone else what their mission is, but I know that this is mine. So I'm keen to keep on going on this path and try and make the best tools for those who want to be as secure as they can be. So yeah.
I mean, because the reason I bring it up is because I feel like these hardware wallet vendors and Cold Card's always been good about this, is like they should just be like a little bit less greedy. Like they don't need to control the whole pie. They're making some profit off of their devices, and they don't need to have a lockdown system. We need open, interoperable systems. And I think ultimately, especially in a world of personal responsibility, open, verifiable options are going to be the ones that are chosen. They're the ones that are going to win out in the market anyway. So if you're going to argue against that and you're going to just try and create a closed system, I mean, it's just short-term thinking.
Yeah, I mean, I think, in response to that particular threat, I think what you should do is at least try and create your multi-sig wallet in different wallet software. So, if you create it in Sparrow, you can easily export to Electrum, Spectre, or what have you, and at least you can check the addresses in those, right? The chances that all of those are going to be compromised on your machine are pretty low. So that's one way you can get around this sort of hardware wallet issue of not being able to actually check the addresses on the device, which is obviously the best, right? We would all want that, and hopefully we'll get it soon.
I mean, just to bring Eco back into this, I mean, Eco, like, would you ever use a closed source wallet with your Bitcoin?
I think I'm guilty of it though, because I used Keep Keys before I used Cold Card. And to be honest, I'm not a developer, I'm not a coder. I really appreciate the fact that Cold Card is open source, or I don't really want to spark the license debate, but I appreciate the fact that it's open source. But to be perfectly honest, like, I wouldn't know what to do with that information if I went online and looked at it. Like, I wouldn't be able to tell you if it's malicious or not. So I like the idea that other people can look at it and determine if it's malicious. But personally, myself, like, I wouldn't be able to tell for myself if it is or not. But to specifically answer your question, if a hardware wallet's like, yeah, this is closed source, like no one can look at it, like take it or leave it, I'm going to leave it.
Well, with hardware wallets is a little bit different, because with hardware wallets, you have this secure element concept. The secure elements are usually closed source, and it adds additional physical protection. So what people don't realize is, like, if you're just storing, your Bitcoin on Bitcoin Core on an air-gapped laptop, for instance, and someone like comes into your house and takes your laptop, if you haven't encrypted that laptop with a strong passphrase, they could probably break it. Now, a secure element on these devices makes it so those kind of brute force attacks, where they're just like hitting you with a ton of attempted guessed passphrases, doesn't work. Like the Cold Card secure element makes it so that if there's 13 mistakes, it's supposed to fucking wipe the thing, and the secure element enforces that. So with hardware wallets, it's a little bit different, and when you use multi-sig, you reduce the trust in between them. For software, I'm a hardliner here. I mean, I agree with you that it's we've only had 10 episodes of Citadel Dispatch, and we're only going to get into the licensing argument for 3 of the 10 so far. Would be nice. The important thing to me is source viewable. The word you were looking for is source viewable. So you're able to view the source. What that means is, and specifically, if you can use it for if the license says you can use it for personal uses, but you can't use it for commercial uses. But the real thing is source viewable. And the reason isn't so that you, as a talented developer, can actually audit yourself. It's twofold. It's the first thing is that other people can audit it, and if it's a useful piece of software, presumably there'll be more eyes on it because there'll be more people using it. And then the second thing is survivability. There's this, it's just really underappreciated, this idea that, if you're using, and like a good example is like Samurai Wallet, right? So you're using Samurai Wallet, you're storing your Bitcoin on Samurai Wallet. And, fortunately we have some standards in BIP39. I mean, you're supposed to know your derivation paths, but for the big wallets, that information will probably never disappear. So like you have some protection there. But the concern that I see from a lot of normies when they don't realize is you come into the space. Oh, that's a perfect example. I forget the name of it. They like turned into shitcoiners. You come into the space and you're like, if I have this wallet, how do I know it's still going to work in 5 years? Right. And if you have some like obscure backup method and you're closed source, that company can just disappear. That company can disappear and you just never have access to your funds. Open source, it's like a fucking virus, it's like it's just like you can't kill it. Like the code is out there. It's like Barbara Streisand. You post you post a picture on the internet. You have to assume that picture is never coming off the internet. You put source code on the internet, and like that source code is always going to be out there. It's going to be if it's good. If it's good code, like it's going to be floated, and it's going to get forked, it's going to get changed and stuff, and you can always find it in 5 years.
Yeah, I think that's totally critical, and I feel better when I know that I can just secure a small amount of information and regenerate that wallet on multiple different platforms, whether that's a Cold Card or Samurai Wallet or Blue Wallet. And honestly, it wasn't until very recently that I learned about the BIP39 derivation path and how important it was to notate that. So, yeah,
I honestly think that's overblown. The derivation path thing.
I don't fully understand it, but what could you explain what the issue is?
So with derivation paths is people think the seed's the private key, but really the seed, you derive the private keys from the seed. So the paths allow you to, have different variations of the same source material, generates different addresses for you. Now there's like semi-standards around them. And really what we want is like complete standards about which derivation path is used but for each different situation. But I think for the major wallets, like that information never disappears. Like in a real world situation in 5 years, you only have the seed. The thing you really need to know is which wallet was it generated in. Like you don't have to go and think about like exactly the derivation paths. Like, it was created in Samurai Wallet, in 2019. Like that information isn't going to disappear out of the internet. It's a very used wallet. It's a heavily used wallet. Now, if you're using some random ass fucking wallet and you don't know what the derivation path is, like, yeah, then you might lose your funds forever. Like Craig, you want to add on to this? Like, what are your thoughts here in terms of like the idea that people should be keeping the seed and the derivation path and whatnot?
Yeah, I mean, I think that sort of thing is definitely becoming less of a risk. I kind of agree with you. I think it's a little bit overblown. Yes, we do lack some like documented standards on a few of these things. I think BIP 84 is the main one. But to be honest, all of the wallets that I've used, and I've used quite a few, they all follow, the guidelines. They're all doing the same thing. I think any wallet that, is talked about in the community that doesn't do that will be brought to task so fast. It's not really a major concern. Make your backups for sure, but to be honest, to go and test the, I don't know, 6 or so paths that it could be is going to take you almost no time at all, right? It's going to take you like a half hour at most, even if you had no idea. Then we got sites like walletsrecovery.org. There's just so much resource out there. I just can't see how the derivation path thing is a major issue anymore. We should certainly make it better, for sure, and we're working on that. But I don't think it's something that should worry you too much.
Yeah, we even had like our boy Luke Childs. I think he created a plugin for Electrum that just like automatically checks all the top derivation paths.
Yeah, for sure. It's easy.
I guess I'm wondering,
Craig,
I'm wondering as an end user, Craig, your perspective as a developer, like why are developer teams using different derivation paths?
Well, they're actually, not, but as I say, for the most part, they're all kind of using the same ones. The reason why we use different derivation paths is because we've got different, Bitcoin has evolved and we've got different script types, right? So we've got, we've got the original, which is generally called legacy. We've got the nested SegWit, and then we've got the native SegWit, which is the addresses that start with BC1. And what the devs have tried to do is make sure that we use a different derivation path for the keys for each one of these different script types. and that's just good kind of practice to keep things apart. You don't want to kind of reuse the same keys over and over. So that's kind of the sort of thinking. The thinking is sound behind it. And as I say, we've come far enough down the road now that everyone's just using the same paths for the same script types. I really haven't seen a wallet that deviates from that, because it's perceived as a very poor kind of thing to do, for the obvious reason that it puts user funds at risk.
See, that makes way more sense to me, because the way the issue was presented to me was that, like, developers are just going willy-nilly using whatever derivation path they want for their specific wallet, and unless you specifically write that down, then you may not be able to restore your funds. So I really appreciate you clearing that up, because it seems much more like a non-issue to me now than it did at the beginning of this conversation.
Great. In fact, one of the things that Sparrow does is it actually prevents you from using a derivation or using a derivation path that matches the derivation path for another script type. In other words, not the one that you're using. So it's really hard to mess that stuff up. Most wallets, just say this is what it is based on the script type that you've chosen. Some of them don't even allow you to choose the script type. It's just not it's not sort of this user configurable thing that it might have been 2-3 years back.
Gotcha.
This conversation is great, by the way, guys. I like I said, I have latency over here, so Eco, feel free to. This is the first time we got our boy Craig on air, so feel free to hit him with questions. That's why I brought you on, is because I think you could ask him some good questions.
Awesome.
So just keep up with that.
Okay.
So I mean, wait, where do we want to go from here? Freaks, first of all, remember, you just throw things into the live chat and we will try and hit them as much as possible. 6102 mentioned that thing I was mentioning by Luke Childs has been merged directly into Electrum, that plugin. So I think it's just in there now, and you can just it'll just automatically scan the known derivation paths. I mean, just to recap, I think the main issue is just with like random ass small wallets. Like, people don't realize, like, if you open iPhone or Android and type in Bitcoin wallet into their app stores, there's a lot of shit. It's mostly shit.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%, dude. It is mostly shit. And I learned that through experience.
Yeah, hit us.
Well,
so Matt, sorry, go ahead, Eco.
I was just like, when I was first getting into this stuff, I was trying to download as many different wallets as I could, because I wanted to try everything and see what worked best. And there's just a lot of junk out there. I'm not using Samurai Wallet and Blue Wallet because those are the first ones I tried out. I'm using them because I went through a lot of trial and error, and they're the best wallets out there for what I'm trying to do. And same thing with Sparrow. Like, I haven't done a lot with desktop wallets. I've got Bitcoin Core, but I've never like funded the wallet on Bitcoin Core. I just use it with my node. But I'm working on this guide for Kevon Devani, and I'm going to go through, like, for total beginners, how to download, install, and secure a Samurai Wallet on an Android, a Blue Wallet on an iPhone, and I needed a desktop wallet, and I checked out Sparrow, and I'm really glad that I did, because it's an amazing. You built a beautiful wallet there, Craig, and I'm really excited to go through the details for everybody and show them how to do it step by step.
Thank you. That'd be great.
Yeah. Were you going to say something there, Craig?
Yeah, I mean, one way we could take this, if you're keen, is to kind of go into some more thoughts around cold storage. I've got a few there that might be a bit controversial, but
yeah.
if you're keen to head down that path.
If Craig, the reason I created Citadel Dispatch is because there's not enough actionable Bitcoin discussion. I want to talk about things that Bitcoiners can be, listening to every Tuesday from their Citadels, and they're like, okay, this is things I can do. These are things I can consider. Actionable, not philosophy, all this bullshit. We all think the number's going to go up. I do. Am I hypocritical for putting the price there? No. It's kind of cool that in hindsight, when I spool all these together, it's going to have the price just constantly showing there. And I need to have something there. So fuck you. One thing I want to start with before we dive into here, and I think this is a great idea. So what I want to do is, I like this as a model. We're going to have Craig. We're going to go down this hole with Craig. We're going to have me asking him questions as someone who's like slightly less technical than Craig asking questions, and we're gonna have Eco asking questions as more of a someone who's more sophisticated, but not, we have 3 different levels here. I don't need to break it down farther than that. Privacy. So Eco, I need you to just jump in here. Like, I got lag, so just jump in here whenever you feel a pressing question. I want you to just hit him with the question. Your perspective matters. I want to start with someone in the chat said, I am KYC'd. I am doxxed. People know I own Bitcoin. My government knows I own Bitcoin. All these different people know I own Bitcoin. He said there's no, negative privacy reason for me to trust a company like Unchained or Casa in a hosted multi-sig setup. Craig, what do you say to that person?
Good question. Yeah, I mean, I guess, I haven't done the research on Unchained, but I have no reason to believe that they're not using the best in class. If you are fully doxed, then and you think that that's a way for you to secure things, and you really appreciate the kind of assistance that they can provide, which I'm sure is excellent, then I think it's a very valid path to go. It's pretty unfortunate that you're in the position that people know your balance and all of those sort of things. It definitely puts you at higher risk. But if you are there, then I can't see a strong reason not to go down that path. Yes, sure, you'll further dox yourself to them, but it doesn't really matter at this point, if that is the case.
So, I mean, I would say, well, first of all, Unchained Capital is a sponsor of RHR. They're not a sponsor of this podcast. They are my boys. I think the product it's a good product. They have an fully open source Caravan. And then they hold one key. So they created an open source stack so you can easily remove it without trusting them. I do think they are best in class. You are trusting them with your privacy. Just to explain best in class, I mean, Casa's app is closed source. So you're looking at your receiving addresses on a closed source app. With the easiest way to verify a Casa multisig is with Caravan, which is Unchained's open source stack. I mean, you could also use Sparrow to do it. But anyway, I digress. The main concern to me, is if the goal is ultimately security, specifically physical security, I completely understand you using a hosted multisig. Like Craig said earlier, geographical separation of keys is super important when you're talking about like home invasion type threat models. And they will hold your hand the whole fucking process. If you're a corporation and you're like a Michael Saylor and you're keeping it one of these massive regulated custodians, Unchained will do that for you instead. And then that way you have the full quorum of keys yourself. You don't have to trust them with custody, but they hold one key. They can correspond with audits and all these different things you want them to do. So there's definitely a value there for someone who wants to trust them with their privacy. Now, if your attempt is to be like a sovereign Bitcoin user and you're KYC'd and docs, I don't want people to think like the enemy of good is perfect. And that goes with privacy as well. And this idea that like there's a million different reasons in this today's age where you can say like my privacy is fucked. It doesn't matter anymore. I have a Facebook. I have an Alexa in my kitchen. Get rid of Alexa. Like you shouldn't have one there. But I have an Alexa in my kitchen. I have a passport. Like there's cameras every day when I go to work and they see me. And I walk out of my condo and there's cameras in my face. And there's all different reasons that you can come up with to say like my privacy is already fucked. Like it doesn't matter. But that's not the case. Privacy is on a scale. It's not black and white. And you can improve different things. And if you're already fully doxxed and whatnot, and all your keys are KYC, you can still go through Whirlpool. You can still hold your keys going forward and have, forward privacy and try and improve your forward privacy. Like, is it 100% perfect? No, but you can improve your situation. And it's important to realize that I do think that all these host and multi-sig providers are going to be compelled to hand over all this information to the major governments. So you should operate under the assumption that at some time in the future, all this information is going to end up in a central database somewhere. And I'm not saying they're not going to fight it. They're going to try and fight it, but it's going to end up there eventually at some point. And you have to at least operate under that assumption. And the information I have to back that up is that Coinbase was compelled to hand over this information as well. They weren't compelled to hand over coins. They didn't. The government didn't say to them, you have to hand over your customers' coins. They said, we want complete transaction history of these users. And Coinbase fought it back and they said, okay, we just need the users that were over 20 grand worth, but they still got all the users.
Great answer, Matt.
Yeah,
So, okay.
I would ask that person, like, why not start defensively reclaiming some of your privacy ground? Like, yeah, you might be doxxed, but like you can take steps to start undoing that and start improving your privacy. You can start building a non-KYC stack and keeping it completely segregated. And you're just taking on so much more risk when you have your identity associated with your Bitcoin. And it's not just physical attacks, but if the US government thinks that their sovereignty is threatened, they are not going to stop at anything to isolate that threat. And if they perceive Bitcoin to be that threat, or people who are self-custodying Bitcoin, there's no length at which they will not go to try and get that from you. And so long as your identity is tied to that Bitcoin, you're a potential target. And I think the world is crazy enough today that that's a reasonable threat to be thinking about.
Yeah, I mean, as an American, maybe you think that's a foreign threat, but there's plenty of governments around the world where I think Americans would 100% say that, of course, they should be worried about their government finding out, and that could easily happen here. And there's people that live in other countries that and we don't want other governments to know either. Like I don't want China to know my transaction history, and like people say to me, they're like, oh, but like America is like they do drone strikes and stuff. Like I know, like when I say I don't want China to know, I'm trying to hit a different demographic that maybe 100% trusts America, even though they shouldn't. China, I don't want China to know my fucking transaction history. And in a world where American citizens aren't allowed to practice privacy best practices and use CoinJoin and use encryption, is a world where China has your full message history and has your full financial transaction history. If you want to go even less than that, I mean, your boss shouldn't know what you're spending your salary on, and your bodega owner or the person owning the store that you bought the sandwich at shouldn't know how much you made as your salary. Like these are basic financial privacy necessities that I think most people agree to when you start to explain the implications. Craig, let's go down this fucking rabbit hole, man. This is why I had you on the podcast. Let's fucking go. I've been looking forward to this for a while.
Okay, great. So I want to cover like three main points here, which, let's just dive in. All of the previous things that were said before about, if you're a beginner and you've got your coins off the exchange, you're doing great. Those all still apply. So this is more the sort of advanced level stuff. But let's get into it. The first one I want to cover, which I have discussed somewhat on Twitter, is the idea, well, not the idea, but rather the fact that when you use Bitcoin Core as your wallet, so in other words, you're connecting directly to Bitcoin Core with whatever wallet software you use, whether it's Spectre or Sparrow, you are using the Bitcoin Core wallet on a sort of internal level. And one of the kind of unavoidable facts about that wallet is that it stores all of your addresses, your balance, and everything in an unencrypted format. Now that's not a sort of a design oversight. That's more a software architecture decision that they've kind of had to make, because if you think about what Bitcoin Core mainly is it's this piece of software that connects to other nodes, downloads, new blocks, and tries to determine, the consensus between these blocks. That's its main purpose. The wallet is a required feature, at least it was when the first version came out. And how it sort of works is every time a new block comes in, what the wallet part of the software does is it goes and has a look at that block and says, are there any transactions in this that apply to me? And if they are, then it stores those in your wallet.dat file. So just the sort of nature of the way that it works means that it has to operate in this unencrypted way with a piece of software that is usually always connected to the net. And that's almost like these two opposing forces, right? On the one hand, you need to keep your Bitcoin Core node synced, and on the other hand, you need to try and keep your wallet, or at least your cold storage wallet, offline as much as you can, right? And those are two opposing forces, and it's the only way to really, in my view, solve this well is to break them apart, right? To kind of not try and make it one thing that you run that tries to do these two things at once. And that's the sort of advantage of being able to use a Electrum server, which allows you to basically send a request in, get the results back, and then the server just forgets about it. It doesn't have to try and say, what's going on? Can I store this information? Do I need to store it? The reason that an Electrum server can do it that way is because all of the transactions that are coming in, it just indexes. So it can do a lookup really fast, whereas the Bitcoin Core node doesn't have that, right? And the Bitcoin Core devs are not keen to add this. So what you have is two different ways of working. One is this way of working where every new block that comes in, we need to analyze it, and we need to pull the information out of it if it applies to us. And the other way of working is every new block that comes in, we just index everything. And as a result, your transactions from your wallet just look the same as everyone else's. So those two very different ways of doing things. And as a result, if we zoom out again, if you're using Bitcoin Core, your whole wallet is sitting in an unencrypted form on that node. And I think most people are not really aware of this. And I think that if we're looking at the physical attack model, people coming into your home, getting access to your PC, they can see whatever balance you have. So even, that gives them a huge tool to be able to say, I want all of that, right? And it's really an easy thing to avoid, right? You just have to find a different way of being able to address this, or at least I see it. That's sort of me as a dev kind of looking at it. Being able to separate these two needs, one of the wallet and one of the node that needs to keep synced, is for me a really important part of the reason why I wanted to build Sparrow in the first place, was just be able to say, you know what, I can keep my wallet, my cold storage wallet offline most of the time. I can only access that thing when I absolutely want to, which might only be a few times a year. But at the same time, I can keep my Bitcoin Core node synced all the time. So I don't have to kind of get out my laptop, sync this thing for several days, and then eventually know what my balance is. So not sure if I've described that well, Matt.
Well,
does that sound something that makes sense?
Yes. First of all, you've described it already to me twice now. So So I think it was explained well to the freaks. If the freaks disagree in the comments, you can let us know. If Eco thinks you didn't describe it well, then we'll know through him as well. But I just wanted to say here, I mean, one of the cool things about Sparrow is that it gives you so many different fucking options, and it tries to explain the options to you as you go through them, which is pretty cool that it can do it in like a UX friendly way. That it like kind of it like explains like, okay, you're doing this, you're doing that. Like, do you want to generate a hot wallet? Do you want to do this? You're back it up. Do you want to add a passphrase? It's just like very verbose, very clear. But it has this watch only feature. So I mean, that's exactly what you just said is that if you use a watch only, the watch only feature in Sparrow, you're susceptible to that as well, even if you use a separate Electrum server, right?
No. I mean, if you use so the way I sort of see it is, and the new Sparrow release that's coming out this week, I think will make it clearer. I was just redoing the whole sort of welcome screen today. So basically, I see it, in terms of the Sparrow world, you can connect in one of three different ways. You can connect to a public server, right? Which obviously means you dox all of your transaction data to that server. Now, what I've done is I've picked a few servers that are run by people like Luke Childs, who, I think you can, to some degree, trust. I'm not saying you should, but, they're not just some random server that, some chain analysis company has spun up and has joined the peer-to-peer network, right? So that's the one way. Connect to a
I didn't realize you did that.
server. It's not
That's a good idea.
live yet. Yeah, so that's
cool.
what's
I like that idea.
Cool. So
sorry, continue.
That's the kind of the second way is the Spectre way. So it connects to your Bitcoin core node and it has all of the issues that I've just sort of mentioned. But let's be honest, just getting to the state of running a Bitcoin core node isn't the easiest thing for many people. So just having done that, you're doing well. It's a big step up. Now, none of your transactions are leaving anywhere, right? It's all staying there. Your own node is validating everything. That's a really good place to be. It's just got the one downside of having your wallet stored in this unencrypted format on the node, right? So that's the second way of doing things. And then the third way, which is the most private way, is to run your own private Electrum server. And that's what Matt was saying wasn't the easiest thing. And it's true, it's not the easiest thing. But with these modern node packages like Umbrel, it's really not that hard anymore. And I kind of want to push back a little bit on that. I think it was hard, but I mean, the number of people I'm seeing on Twitter every day with sort of Umbrel, and various things, it's getting a lot easier.
Well, if you remember what I said was 2 years ago, I feel like we all hit this hole where we were like, okay, Electrum's the best thing, but it's just not there. It's just too complicated, and Electrum personal server is too complicated. And two things happened. We had you created Sparrow, we had Caravan, Nunchuck, Spectre created. And then on the opposite side, we had this blossoming of node packages that made it easy to run your own Electrum server, right? We had the combination, like both happened because of the same. It was like this. There was this group realization 2 years ago, and we were like, "Fuck! Like this needs to improve." And over the last 2 years, it's just crazy. Like you look at it. I mean, you mentioned Get Umbrel. I mean, we have Keto. We have Keto in. We have Keto in the chat right now. He has Nodl, which is a pre-built version, a pre-built your own node, highly performant. We have Ronin Dojo. We have MyNode. We have Raspberry Blitz. Like there's just all these packages that make it easy to run your own node and run your own Electrum personal server. And it all kind of happened over this bear markets are when things get done. People are like, oh, all caps Odell. Like, do you not care about? Are you not in for the tech? You only care about the price and stuff. It's like, no, I'm trying to get through the bull market noise, and I'm like going to attract people with some price. Some people are going to stumble into Citadel Dispatch because they see the price ticker going on. They might stumble in because I'd say, Bitcoin's designed to pump forever, which it is. And I'm going to make them listen to the custodial talk. I'm going to make them listen to the privacy talk. I'm going to make them listen to the KYC talk. And this is how you get through in bull markets. But let's not pretend that bull markets are going to be as productive as bear markets. Bear markets are when shit gets done. The bull cycles are like kind of when we watch the shit happen that we kind of expected, but it just like blew up farther than we could think. But I just want to, I mean, at the end of the day, I do agree that this is a threat, and this is what you initially mentioned to me. But at the end of the day, like in practice, like the average person, whether they're using Electrum personal server or not, Electrum server or not, like they're going to have a computer that they have dedicated. If for convenience sake, they're probably going to have a computer that's dedicated to holding their public keys, whether that's core holding actual transaction data along with it, or whether that's Sparrow holding an XPub. They're going to have a computer that's hopefully air gapped, that is going to be holding their public keys for them. And I guess Electrum makes that interface easier. Is that what you're saying?
No, I mean, look, I think the whole thing, I actually really doubt a lot of people are going out there and setting up air-gapped computers. I've certainly done it before, but it's expensive. It's not the easiest thing. I think that the most common way that people are going to go is the sort of hardware wallet route. And I think, if you can use, as I say, a different piece of software apart from Bitcoin Core and apart, and sort of just connect to your Electrum server. Now, as I was saying, the one real big advantage of that is that thing just indexes everything. So it doesn't need to store details of your wallet. So however often you want to check your cold storage, which shouldn't be often, right? It should be like a few times a year, maybe once a month, who knows? But it's not something that you're going to be doing every day. You want to try and keep that cold storage wallet offline as much as you can. So then you can fire up Sparrow, you can load the wallet for the time that you require it. You can get your balance down. The server forgets that you asked for it. That's the way it's designed. And you're not storing anything anywhere. So it's really only present, on the encrypted file, the Sparrow wallet file, and in the RAM of your computer for the time that you have that wallet open. And that's really the time that you're trying to minimize, right? The time that wallet is open for. You don't want that wallet to be sort of sitting around in an unencrypted form for a long period of time. That's at least what I'm trying to do.
So the advantage is if you use it on a hot computer and you have like your XPub on the hot computer with Sparrow, then it's encrypted. But if you have your XPub in Core, it's all the transaction data is unencrypted sitting there.
Yeah, right? That's right. So, I mean, what you can do, a different way of doing it is to set up the dedicated air-gapped computer with an encrypted hard drive. And then you open that thing up like a few times a year, and you're going to have to sync it, which will take a while. So that increases your risk because you're now sitting waiting for the thing to sync.
It's not going to take that long though, right?
I don't know. It depends. Like my old MacBook Pro, I was trying to sync 12 days today, and it took 6 hours. So it takes a little while. To check your balance shouldn't take you more than 10 minutes to send a transaction. Right. You can get that time down.
Hey,
I agree. Yes, please.
So, Craig, I really like the idea of separating the Bitcoin Core wallet from the node that's like checking transactions on the network. And the reason I say that is because when I built my Bitcoin Core node on a Raspberry Pi, I was just arbitrarily like entering code that I was finding in multiple places on the internet. I had no idea what I was doing. Finding good instructions to build the node was pretty difficult. I'm not a coder, I'm not a developer. So I felt, once I got it up and running, I felt really uncomfortable with the idea of putting any funds in that wallet. I liked the idea of having a node that was operating and keeping my own copy of the blockchain to check transactions against. But I really didn't like the idea of having funds on it because I didn't know what I had just typed into the computer to make this thing work. And if I understand you correctly, you're saying like if I use my Bitcoin Core node to back up Sparrow, then the transactions done in my Sparrow wallet are being stored on the Bitcoin Core wallet.dat file unencrypted. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
It is an unfortunate thing, and I don't think it's often talked about. But actually, like what all the freaks should do is just open that wallet.dat file in a text editor, like prove it for yourself. Don't trust what I'm saying. Go and have a look, and you'll see there's a whole lot of binary in there. So it's not the easiest thing to read, but I guarantee you'll see your sort of addresses mixed in with all of that, and that's just the way that it's built, right? There's, as I say, because of the fact that it needs to be online and needs to check for every new block, it doesn't really make sense for them to encrypt things because they have to have it unencrypted all the time anyway, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, it does. And you're saying the Electrum one is indexing constantly, right?
Yeah, so that basically just indexes every transaction that comes in, right? So the reason that the Bitcoin Core one needs to work the way it does is because it doesn't index everything. It tries, for very good reasons, to keep your disk space down. It doesn't index everything that comes in, right? And the Bitcoin Core devs are just not keen to build that feature in. So that's the way that it is.
I came across this command you can put in the bitcoin.conf file. If I recall correctly, it was like tx index equals true. And I thought it was so that your node would be indexing everything.
Yeah, so that's a really good point. So what that actually does is it makes it so you can look up any transaction on your node if you have the transaction ID. What it does not do, what it does not do is allow you to look up the balance of your address. And that's what you actually need. So it's unfortunately of no use for a wallet. Like a wallet can't really use that in the sense of saying, can I check my balance? Because you need to be able to look up the balance of an address, not the transaction ID.
Right. Okay. That makes sense. Thank you.
Sure.
So, I mean, first of all, thank you both. That was awesome. Let's get more of that. I think, Craig, I mean, to answer your question, the reason there's not much concern placed to that is because Bitcoin privacy is a fucking mess right now. And that's like the least of people's concerns in terms of privacy.
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess as I was saying, Matt, I think that the kind of physical threat is a bit underappreciated. And that for me, I guess this is being driven by my own fears. I'm sort of thinking about this in my own way. And I was just thinking there's no way that I'm putting my pub keys unencrypted on a machine which is constantly connected to the net. I mean, it's just it doesn't make any sense to me as a dev. I've seen servers being hacked many times, and at the very least, I want those to be offline for as much of the time as I can have. Right? That for me is a key goal here. So I hear what you're saying, and there's lots of areas to improve on, but this for me is one that just seemed kind of important.
No, I mean, look, I 100% agree. 100% agree. I think it's a very good point. This is one of the reasons I wanted you on. I've tried to explain the point on RHR, but you do it in a way. You just, obviously you're very passionate about this topic. I think that to me, what 95% of users aren't using their own node. Whose ever node they're using, they're doxing their transactions to. Right.
Correct.
And then like 90% of, or like 95% of people who come into the space are using KYC services. And then they're giving them their passport and their like everything. And their address that they're sent to, and they don't know how to use CoinJoin, and they're getting scared out of it. And certain influencers might tell them it's likely illegal. And that they should use BlockFi. And so we end up in a situation where like, I realized that the most effective way to motivate people is to stick to like a clear trajectory. You know what I mean? It's like it's almost like I get but I respect it. I understand it, and I agree that it's a true concern. But I would say, I would also argue that until like 6 months ago, you couldn't even really use a hardware wallet with Bitcoin Core, let alone multi-sig, for the average user. So maybe, maybe there'll be improvements.
Yeah, again, Matt, this is all sort of advanced stuff, and I really don't want to scare people and stop them using whatever that they're on now. I think it's important to keep saying that whatever setup you have now, if you've got your coins off the exchange, you're doing well. Like, please do not take what I'm saying as advice to go and make a dramatic change. Like, that's the last thing that I want. I think it's just good that we talk about these things, because where else are we going to do it, right? This is a good
100%.
place to have the chat, but I don't want to freak people out. It's just one of those things to be aware of and to think about. And if it worries you, do something about it. And if you're not too sort of concerned, that's also fine. It's all up to the individual user and how comfortable they sort of are. I think that the solutions we have out there are great and they're getting better, but that doesn't mean that we can't talk about, the sort of next sort of levels and steps.
Fuck yes. This is why we dispatch. I hope to have you on many times in the future. This is the show that is not embarrassed to have people on multiple times, but just notice that we have people on for the first time they've ever been on a podcast. And it's, a fucking fantastic conversation. Craig, do you have us further down this rabbit hole? We hit your main point that you've hit me in the past with, and I need to be a little bit more clear about it. I agree. It is a risk. Let's go down. You want to keep going down this rabbit hole?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So
What's number 2?
Number 2. So I'm going to speak from a personal kind of experience here. When I started building Sparrow back in the day, my whole career has basically been building web apps, right? And that's the sort of default, and for very good reason. They're extremely powerful way to get applications to people. But I just thought immediately, like, that's not the right software architecture for a wallet that I want to use at least part of the time as my cold storage wallet. And why is that? Well, browsers are just these amazing, but also incredibly complex things, and let's be honest, their main purpose is to gather all kinds of different resources from around the net and display them. That's kind of almost about as far away from what you want a cold wallet to be. It just seems like a web browser is not the ideal thing, and there's plenty of people that have written about this. It's just strange to me that we are using wallets that are essentially sitting in web browsers, and I guess I'm just putting it out there because maybe I'm completely nuts, but I've talked to a few devs. I was having a chat to Nadav at Sheshek earlier this
Right.
sort of week, and he kind of agrees. He's like, if he actually made the good point that if you look at how most web applications are made, they're made with JavaScript that uses internally this kind of dev tool called NPM. And what NPM does is it just kind of, the sort of ecosystem uses up a whole lot of really small little projects or packages. And the trouble with that approach is that it becomes hard to sort of audit it. And we have seen, if you cast your mind back to 2018, we had that dev who actually introduced basically a Bitcoin stealing mechanism into one of the packages used by the Copay wallet. So that's a little sort of dev aside there, but I just wonder about the browser thing, and I'd like to get your views, Matt.
So,
do you think we should worry about it?
So first of all, Craig, I love you. This is Citadel Dispatch. We don't mince words here, and we talk frank. So when he talks about browser based, he means Spectre is electron based. Spectre basically runs in a web browser, like it runs on the same engine of the web browser. It's its own little web browser instance. And what is the main advantage of that? The main advantage of that is cross compatibility. They can just easily make it so it runs on many platforms. First of all, Zizek is fucking a boss. I love that dude. I appreciate him, and I respect his opinion. But yeah, obviously it's an issue, right? And I think we're in a situation, but this is the thing, right? And I said this to you, Craig. It's like Sparrow caught me completely off guard. Like, you came out of nowhere. I don't even know who the fuck you are, and that's the coolest part, because I love NIMS. This whole show was designed to pump NIMS. But like, you came out of nowhere with this beautifully designed native application that is on multiple platforms, that is both user-friendly and beautiful, but also super power user focused, and shows you everything you need to see. Like, where the fuck did you come from? But we didn't really have an easy way to interact with Bitcoin Core and multi-sig hardware wallets, and bring your own signers, and they made it super user friendly. And I would say, from a security point of view, if we have the standards on the hardware wallets and you're verifying it, and to be clear, my guide the main guide that I talk to people about is we run bitcoin.com. It's single sig cold card with Spectre and Core. You're verifying everything on the cold card, right? So the trust in the actual software is a privacy trust. It's not a security trust, because the cold card is acting as a second factor there, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think, yeah, that's right. It's largely about trying to be as private as you can be. I think we are, if you're using hardware wallets, you've largely, dismissed the chance of losing your funds unless you screw it up, right? I think that's, but from a privacy point of view, we do need to try and reduce the attack surface as much as we can. One can never do enough there, but you can think about things, and you can try and kind of approach it from a method that doesn't make it too hard to use, but at the same time kind of uses the kind of tech that leads to the lowest attack surface. That's the way that I like to think about it. I see there's a comment there: web browser engine is not equal to a web browser. That is true. So the Electron platform is built off Chromium, which is the same thing that powers Google Chrome and Edge and other browsers. If you go and have a look at the sort of commit log on that, there's a commit about every 10 to 15 minutes. I mean, it is an amazing open source project. It really is. And it drives so much of the world, but it's just incredibly busy. And if you just think about all the things that it can do, that Chromium sort of engine, I think it is a very complex thing. I'm not comfortable myself with the complexity there. So I kind of wanted to raise it, because it feels to me like we need to talk about it at least a bit. Certainly the devs that I've spoken to tend to agree. So yeah.
I like your approach.
So that was. Go ahead. Before you get started, Eco, just that question was from our boy Keto. Keto, I just sent you a Telegram message. If you want to join us in this chat, just click that link that I sent you on Telegram. Eco, go.
All I wanted to say was that I like your approach, and I think your main point is that's widening the attack surface, and if it's not necessary, then why not keep it simple? And I think you've done a really good job with that.
Yeah, thanks. Keto just asked how many dependencies is Sparrow using. That's a really hard question, obviously, to sort of answer because it depends how deep you go, right? But if you just look at the sort of build file, there's probably around 15 to 20 or so. Don't have an exact figure. And you know, it's something that I tried really hard to keep as low as I could. Unfortunately, when you've got to do things like support cameras for QR codes and stuff, it is hard to keep them down. But there are many times when I sort of just avoided doing something a certain way because it would add one more dependency. So it is something that I think, you know, devs are aware of in the space, but it's kind of, if you're going from a browser from the sort of start, then there's just a whole layer there that you have to be aware of.
Just we appreciate the discretion. Just to be clear here, Keto is currently in bed. He cannot join us. He is only participating to be a text. Hopefully, we will have that in the future. Yeah, I mean, I think this is a good point that you made. I think that in general, we want to have like the lightest native software possible with the least amount of dependencies. Do we all agree on this?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I mean, for sure from my side, you know, and I would certainly like to keep, you know, getting Sparrow's dependencies as low as I can. You know, that's always the sort of aim, I think. So yeah, I mean, I really don't want to, you know, point fingers, and I think Spectre guys are doing a great job. You know, just the fact that they're helping people get their coins offline is awesome. You know, these are just thoughts that I have, and I think it's worth, you know, having a chat about it.
Yo, Bitcoiners love Rust. Craig, do you have an opinion on this?
I think Rust is great. Zizek writes in Rust. He's awesome.
Keto says, thanks for clarifying this. Low dependency count is great. Be careful with image manipulation libs, though.
Completely agree. And web view libs as well, which I've luckily managed to avoid.
Honestly, Craig, you're killing it. I appreciate you, man. Thank you for joining us on Dispatch. This is just great. This is fantastic. This is why we dispatch. This is the whole point. UTS9 wants to know, and I'm throwing this question at Craig. For single sig, why would I use Cold Card with Spectre or Sparrow and Bitcoin Core or Electrum? Right, you should be using Electrum according to Craig, and not just use Bitcoin Core just straight up. Like why? Like this is the hot wallet question all over again.
Well, not really. I mean, you know, if you assume when you say use Bitcoin Core, you mean use the Bitcoin Core GUI, or the sort of Qt front end, and there's no, you know, technical reason. I think it's just ease of use. You know, the reality is the Bitcoin Core wallet must move at the same speed as Bitcoin Core. Bitcoin Core must, for very good reasons, move at a very slow speed. So, you know, that's, I guess, also a case of where you have these two kind of things. One, you have this consensus library that needs to be super slow. I mean, we need to check everything. And on the other hand, you have this wallet which needs to move a lot faster. And they're currently all tied into one. And as a result, Bitcoin Core's wallet is not that easy to use. So the main reason to use Spectre or Sparrow rather than Bitcoin Core is just really ease of use. It's just quite difficult. It's not, you can do it, but it's not so easy. And I guess there's more chance of you screwing up if you're using the Bitcoin Core wallet, just because for all the best intentions in the world, it just can't move as quickly and get the same kind of UI love.
I love Bitcoin Core as a hot wallet. Like I think it's just fucking fantastic. I don't know. Like when when I withdraw from, so I have my like KYC stack that's just like my fiat job with my fiat check and my fiat salary just gets sent through Cash App and just comes out the other side on Bitcoin, and it arrives in a Core hot wallet. And I just like it. It just has very easily coin control, and it'll sync when it syncs, and I don't fucking care. And I just press receive address, and I just fucking do it. It just like gets the job done. Someone asked me, do I push back on companies I advise if they use non-native? Yeah, I mean, yeah. There's only one company. I advise I advise 4 companies right now. Full disclosure, you can view them on mattodell.com. All the companies I advise. I advise 4 companies officially. I advise a shit ton of companies and founders in this space. I do most of it for fucking free because I want the space to be better, and because there's just so many bad actors out there that if people don't do it, then no one else will. Like if I don't do it, who else will fucking do it? Of the 3 companies that have given me equity, you have Hexa Wallet, which is an actual wallet, and they're a React Native wallet. And then I have 2 basically KYC on ramps, to be quite frank. I have Swan Bitcoin and I have BottlePay. And then the 4th company is Bitcoin Magazine. I build them out hourly. They don't give me equity. And if you want to go and look at the equity, I have it lined up on mattodell.com, which no one else fucking does. And they should all fucking do it. And if any of them shitcoin or do anything unethical, fucking drop them and publicly call them out, which it says that also on my site. So there's your answer. What else do we have here? 17 dependencies on Sparrow is what 6102 said. Do you have does that sound right to you?
It does, yeah. Yeah, that's a good count, I think. I think he went into the build file.
Yeah, welcome to the 6102 show.
Awesome.
Just for those of us who don't really understand, like, how does that number of dependencies compare to other wallets?
Yeah, so I don't want to like this whole dependency thing is it's easy to just give a figure and make it sound good or bad. You know, it's really about just trying to audit the libraries that a wallet uses, right? If you've got 1,000, that's really hard to go in there and just sort of audit them all. If you know, how often do they change? That's the kind of thing. I think it's you know, it's one of those areas which I think needs a lot more work. But you know, the reality is that I was trying to sort of make is the sort of JavaScript ecosystem, just the way in which it's evolved, tends to have like hundreds of dependencies. You know, it's a development mindset that they've had, and there's plenty of good reasons for doing it that way. It just doesn't fit the cold storage kind of approach that well, because it makes auditing the software harder. That's the kind of main message that I was trying to make there.
Cool.
Yeah, so I mean, Duck Nebuchadnezzar asked, like he said, Big Magazine's not listed. I'm trying to figure out. I think I need to list them separately because it's. I don't know if I'm supposed to list out everyone I bill out hourly or not. Like that's like their question. But to be clear, freaks, like as number goes up, like all this is negligible. Like Bitcoin Magazine is not paying me enough to hold my fucking tongue. Like I will fucking talk. If I have something to say, I'll fucking say it. No one can pay me enough to fucking hold my tongue, and that's the beauty of Bitcoin. Yeah, I mean, so this is fucking awesome. Craig, do you have? Are we down the rabbit hole? Do we go farther? Is there a farther rabbit hole, or have we hit the bottom?
One more, Matt. One more. Okay,
let's go.
So yeah, so this is something that I sort of discovered as I was building Sparrow. Is you know, you have this idea of you have your cold storage wallet and you want to keep it offline as much as you can. And what's it doing when it's offline? Well, it's obviously sitting in an encrypted format. And as Eco mentioned earlier, we are using the best kind of military grade encryption that we can, which is AES 2556, and that's awesome. But one of the things you have to do before you run the encryption algorithm is you have to derive a cryptographic key from the password that you enter to open your wallet. And there are various algorithms that derive this key. Now, the one that Electrum uses is incidentally the same one that is used to derive your private key from your seed. And it's an algorithm called PBK DF2. So great name. The unfortunate problem with using PBK DF2 for passwords is that it's really old. It's like decades old, and it's now easily attackable by sort of modern hardware. So you sort of open yourself up if somebody has access to your cold storage wallet file to being able to do what they call a rainbow table attack, where they basically feed a whole lot of common phrases in, and they essentially brute force your password just by running it through this relatively insecure key derivation algorithm. So, it's a technical detail, but I do think it matters. I think there's an interesting aside to that as well. If you are writing a piece of software for a mobile wallet, you are greatly limited because you need to support a large range, particularly of Android devices, which, as we know, some of them can be pretty underpowered. You can't choose a particularly hardcore key derivation algorithm, because you'll sit there waiting for like a minute for your wallet to open, and your phone will be getting hot and your battery will be going down. It just doesn't make a lot of sense. So, the power of the phone actually limits the algorithm that you can choose. Now, you can always get around this by using a super long password of like random numbers and letters and punctuation marks. But, that obviously then increases the risk that you might forget that thing or write it down, or, have it in a place where it can be found. So, 2 points here. One, using desktop software means you can leverage the power of your desktop to use a more hardcore key derivation algorithm, which is good. The second is that you need to make sure that algorithm should take around half a second or more to derive the key. If it doesn't, then you're opening yourself up to, sort of hardware GPU type attacks on that particular file. Now, I mean, this might sound a bit sort of esoteric, what's the chances that someone's going to get a hold of your wallet file and start doing that? But, I'm trying to look ahead to the point where, you really just don't want to have to worry about that, because it exists, right? The tech exists to make that stuff really hard to do. And we may as well use it. One of the surprising factors is that despite being a cryptocurrency, the cryptography is actually often pretty old school that we are using. And I'm not saying we should be using the thing that was invented last year, but using something that was invented in the last decade seems like a good idea. So that's kind of the last point that I wanted to make was, really, I think it references what you can do on a mobile wallet in terms of securing your wallet file, particularly for cold storage. And I think, as I say, I was just really surprised that Electrum used this relatively insecure key derivation algorithm. And to be honest, I think that's because they have been around for such an impressively long period of time, and they've targeted such a wide range of sort of platforms. So it's not a slight on them so much as it is just what they have done, and the sort of space that they have come from. Yeah, that's point number 3.
Is that what people are doing when they buy a wallet.dat file online? Is that how they're trying to brute force it?
It could be, yeah, yeah. So you can encrypt the private keys if you're using a hot wallet with your Bitcoin Core wallet. Then the private keys you can encrypt. I don't actually know exactly what the key derivation algorithm is that they use, so I don't know how hard that is to do. But it sounds like that's what they would be doing.
Oh, interesting.
I mean, so this goes hand in hand with the fact that I think like Sparrow, like there's no reason to use the Electrum front end anymore. It's like if you want super user friendly, you use Spectre, and then if you're an advanced user, then you use Sparrow, and there's just no reason to use Electrum.
Yeah, I mean, sure, but I think we shouldn't knock it Electrum too much. The fact that they've been around for so long, Matt, that code has had so many eyeballs on it, so many transactions have gone through it. There's value in that. So I still have a bit of love there.
Fair.
Just to be clear,
Nico?
that's different than saying using Electrum personal server, right? You guys are talking about two different.
Yeah,
I'm talking
it's
about the
pretty
front end.
confusing.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. All right.
Right, Craig. We're talking about the front end here. We're talking about deriving keys.
Correct.
And and for a practical point of view, the big no-no that we all learned as Bitcoiners was blockchain.info when they were using random.org or whatever for their key generation.
Yeah.
You want to talk about this, Craig?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's, I think that was more to derive the nonce. I don't know too much about that, to be honest. But, so I can't really talk too much to that, I'm afraid.
So what happened was they were using random.org as their source of entropy. And if you want to do key generation in a safe way, you need a source of entropy. So forget about the algorithm. The entropy is more important. The algorithm is important, but the entropy is more important. And they were using random.org or random.com. I don't know which one it was. And there was like a 404 error or something. Like they couldn't connect to it. So like there was a bunch of keys generated in that middle time where it was just they were using no entropy. It was just the same. It was the same entropy. So this is why when I say to people use cold card, like roll your dice, right? Add entropy. You don't want to trust when we say entropy, we mean randomness. Like you don't want to trust the randomness of whatever your device is generating. Would you agree, Craig?
Yeah, for sure.
Like entropy is the most important part, right?
Always roll the dice. Always roll the dice. But also, like, don't there are so many things to think about here. I think, to be honest, I think that risk has been a little bit overblown. It's super important, but it's almost like it has become the I don't know the sort of dominant factor at times. I really. Sorry, Matt.
If you have like a closed source wallet, that allows you to roll dice, like it doesn't matter. Like it's still closed source. Like you have no fucking idea if they're using the dice or not. All right.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, honestly, the chances of your cold card, giving you bad random numbers are really, really small. But it's easy to roll the dice, so do it. That's my sort of advice.
Well, I think I would say the argument is it's if we can get it into standard practice that if you're a cold card user, you're going to use your own dice entropy, then suddenly it takes an attack vector away from Rodolfo, right? It's like it's not just Rodolfo possibly attacking you; it's anyone attacking Rodolfo to attack the entropy, and they won't because they just know that all the users are going to roll dice.
Yeah. I think that's a great argument.
So, I mean, I'm curious, Craig, like you've been kind of quiet about like CoinJoin and shit. Like, how do you feel about on-chain privacy with Bitcoin? Like, I know Eco's like super pro He's been pushing this. Samurai is the leader in PayJoin adoption. They call it Stowaway by them. They added this whole new Tor layer called Soroban where you can communicate between the users. They're doing this thing that I wanted to talk about this episode called Greta's Fury, which is, I guess it's important to trigger the blue checks by bringing Greta into it. But the idea is to like kind of destroy the transaction graph by just doing all these PayJoins in a row. They call them stowaways. It requires these paynims, BIP47. So like, I'm just really curious, like on your opinion, and this opinion is not stated yet. I'm curious your opinion on Chaumian coin joins. I'm curious on your opinion on join market. I'm curious on your opinion on like these samurai post mix tool, not post mix tools, just spending tools. Stowaway, Stonewall. Stonewall is basically I don't know how familiar you are with the samurai stack, but I'm just curious on all of these on chain privacy things and where you stand here, how into them you are. Like, are you paying attention to them, or do you not care about them? Where do you stand?
Sure. So let's go through them. So CoinJoin, I think, is great. I don't like the fact that it's not a standardized thing. You know, at least from a Sparrow development point of view, I've really tried to go down a standards-based route. And that's the one thing that worries me. The other thing is fees. So, you know, the mempool is, or I don't know, it's really high. Like, I'm not sure what it is right now, but it's going to only get more. And I think that is, you know, that just worries me as a long-term plan. Like, it's great today, don't get me wrong, but, you know, if the fee market continues to develop as it's doing, I do worry a little bit about whether most people are going to be prepared to pay the fees that will be required to be paid. So that's the sort of CoinJoin side. I have done CoinJoins. I think they're great. I think it's a great tool. I'm very happy we have access to it. Am I going to build it into Sparrow? I'm not yet sure because of those reasons. PayJoin is built into Sparrow. I think it's excellent. I think the one flaw in PayJoin that we have is that it currently requires this server kind of end to it. So that's the way that it's usually implemented. So
you need to have, like, what are you going to do?
Well, that's okay, but the issue is that you have to have like a BTC Pay server, which has an HTTP endpoint, right? That you can then talk to, right? And I would really like to see individual wallets being able to talk to each other. Now, that's obviously what Samurai have built with Soroban, and that's awesome. And that's something that's really, really interesting. And I'm hoping that becomes some kind of a spec so we can all build it and all of the wallets can then take part, right? Because, I mean, just think about it. If every Bitcoin transaction you paid a little bit more and made it a PayJoin, it's just so much easier to break the heuristics than everyone doing CoinJoins. I mean, it's just, for me as a dev, that just makes a huge amount of sense. So that's something I'm super keen on, and it uses BIP49 now. So that's definitely something that I need to look into and sort of figure out whether I need to add that as the first step to getting a Soroban or Soroban-like layer, so we can start doing PayJoins between wallets rather than between wallets and sort of merchant wallets, if you will. Yeah.
I mean, so there's like a fight here. There's a fight between like the BTC Pay Wasabi crowd, and it's like every good thing I get stuck in the middle. Like, the important thing as a Bitcoiner is, like, if you're a public Bitcoiner doing content like this every week, like, if you're not getting stuck in the middle of multiple fights, like, you're just doing things wrong. Like, that's just what I've come to the conclusion of. But like the Wasabi BTC Pay decided they're going to have their own fucking PayJoin implementation. Their PayJoin implementation, it revolves around the merchant customer experience. Samurai's like, fuck you. We think P2P is the way. Okay. And P2P We don't have to have an online server. All we have to do is the receiver needs to be ready to accept his payment. That's it, right? And that's what Stowaway is. Basically, he just needs to be online, ready to go. But there's no like server or whatever, right? It's just he just like goes into his app and is like, I'm gonna go connect to Tor and make this shit happen.
Yeah, and I think that for me is the way that it needs to work, and there's no technical reason why that can't happen. Like, some samurai have obviously built it. It works. Why can't we all do it? It just makes so much sense. So I really hope that we see a spec, because we're not going to get broad global option across wallets until we have some kind of a BIP. And that's, one thing that the BTC Pay guys did is they wrote BIP 78, right, which is the pay join BIP. And as a result, that is the sort of implementation. Now, I know that the Samurai guys, if you suggest that they do a BIP, they won't.
They're never going to do the BIP. They're never going to do the BIP. They don't agree with the BIP process. They disagree with the BIP process from a principle point of view. But so my question, I guess my question to you is, I mean, so these pay joins are cool. Like, I think this is like a cool concept. I like the idea of Saraban. You mentioned fees. I mean, like, fees are just going to go up, right? Like, no matter what, fees go up. I think people need to, like, we need people to be educated to realize that privacy is worth the additional payment. It'll always be more expensive.
Yeah, but I think that we need to try and, as best as we can, be sort of clever about the way that we do it. I mean, think about a pay join in every wallet, right? Everyone's being encouraged to pay join. I mean, it would break every chain analysis company. It's game over, if you can get to that sort of point. I think it's a goal.
The thing that really, so like I said, I'm stuck in the middle of all these guys. And I really do. And the Samurai guys will hate me for it. I really do believe the Wasabi guys are trying their best. That they have best intentions in mind. And the Wasabi guys will hate me when I say that I think the Samurai guys have best intentions in mind. A lot of this argument it came from BIP 47, which is Paynims. BIP 47, these payment codes. This idea that you can accept a donation with text, almost stealth address, like with just like a plain text. You have like a plain text, characters, and you can accept a payment in a semi-private way where on-chain privacy doesn't completely destroy you. And they just got wrecked. They got wrecked on the BIP 47 thing. Like, Luke was against it. Everyone was against it. They discouraged it for usage. And they basically built their whole wallet around BIP 47. And in their defense, it makes sense to me. It seems the right path to go. It's like almost a distributed identifier for wallets so that you can create a new addresses. 6102 wants to mention that he's blocked by Wasabi and he thinks it's hilarious. Craig, do you have a feeling on BIP 47? Like, do you have any opinion here? It amazes me that the thinkers of Bitcoin, like the smart guys in Bitcoin, don't talk about BIP 47 ever. And I always am just constantly trying to figure out why.
Yeah, I mean, look, direct answer, Matt, is no. I actually really need to get into the spec and see whether it sort of makes sense. I understand that there's been a recent change. I haven't got into that change yet. I was concerned about the additional transaction that was required, but I
but whatever, bro. Yeah, now they've removed the requirement, and in Saraban it goes just through a Tor layer. But regardless of the requirement, like this idea, do you agree with me? Like this idea that like with Bitcoin, like you should be able to just like post text. I should be able to just like post a fucking sentence that allows you to donate to me in a semi-private way without like me doxing my whole on-chain balance. like that should just be that should be a capability of Bitcoin, right? Like easy donations without BTC Pay server. I don't want BTC Pay server. I just want to fucking post something on Twitter and just be like, if you want to donate to me, this is how you donate to me, and like every wallet supports it. Do we agree that that should be a fucking thing?
Absolutely.
Fuck yeah.
Fuck yeah, exactly. And that's what Paynims attempts to solve. Like, it's not perfect. I don't pretend it's perfect, but that's what they attempt to solve. And the major negative is that it's just only Bitcoin. Only Samurai allows you to spend it, which is a major negative. Like if you need them to be on Android and you need them to be using Samurai, otherwise they can't donate to you. But we need to get past that. I think people need a way to just easily accept Bitcoin in a private way, at least in a more private way than just fixed address. Like fixed address is not private at all. And it just needs to be done. Like it's like a major pain point. It's one of those things that's like everyone's getting censored. Everyone's having trouble receiving donations. Like we should have an easy way for them to do it.
Well, Matt, you'll be happy to know that it is literally the next thing on my list. So I am keen to get involved. I completely agree with you. I guess the one thing that was making me a bit uncomfortable, and it's probably just a result of me not understanding the spec well, is how much of this is tied into paynims.com. I don't think it is, but I just need to go and kind of really make sure that it's a standards-based approach, because if it is, then we should use it.
Oh no, so the part that's Paynims is instead of like a payment code, it's just the NIM.
Right.
That part's tied into paynims.is. So like the idea that you could be like, but the way you sloppy bot 52 or whatever, and then you look up sloppy bot 52 and it's like the payment code, that is centralized. Okay. Which I think is like a decent enough trade-off. Like the idea that like you just have to look up the payment code somewhere because like you don't want to type in like 55 letters and numbers instead of sloppy bot 52. Yeah.
Okay. Got it. I wonder if other wallets can integrate into that, or whether it's just sort of a Samurai wallet thing.
Well, look. If you want to implement a new standard, like we can make that happen. If you want to integrate with Paynim, you let me know. I can make that happen. Like we whatever it is, like let's make this fucking thing happen. Like this is like a thing that I think is super important. I talked about earlier that I'm advising HexaWallet. It's not a coincidence that HexaWallet has a donation mode that gives you like a borderline BTC Pay type custodial. It's like it's custodial privacy relationship, but you hold your own keys. Luke was against that too. Of course he was. But like, I think that's super important. Like we're going to have more and more people, especially in the Western world, that get deplatformed from all these donation platforms, like the GoFundMe's and the Kickstarters and shit. And they're going to want an easy way to do it. And that easy way can't be either paste a fucking fixed address or go BTC Pay server. Like we need to have a middle ground.
Agreed, Matt. Agreed. I'm gonna dive in.
Yeah, I can't wait to see a second wallet integrate the Paynims or Bit47.
We basically just need we get one iPhone wallet to do it, and then we're good. That's it.
And then chain analysis is totally fucked.
I love it.
Well,
so the cool part about the reason he says that is because once you have the Paynims with Soroban now, if they integrate Soroban as well, then you can do a stowaway for PayJoin, or you can do a Stonewall ×2 where two people do a coin join and then it pays out to a third person who doesn't even accept. They just give you a regular Bitcoin address. And that's kind of the situation we want to be in, I think.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
So I mean, we're like 2.5 hours in here. This has been fantastic. How do you get a fixed address? I don't even know what he's talking about. So, I mean, a big thing in this podcast, which is hilarious because I'm in it for the tech, is I make sure that every single person that comes on the show, and I expect you guys to come on as a return guests, answers the question, do you think Bitcoin is designed to pump forever? I'm going to start with Eco. Does the purchasing power of Bitcoin ever stop?
No, I don't think it does. I'm not. I want to be clear. I am not a NGU fan, but I don't think Bitcoin is ever going back to zero or even close to it. More or less, it is a one-way street.
Craig?
It's going to keep going until something better comes along. And
No.
I don't see that happening anytime soon. Well, look, I mean, guys, nothing lasts forever, right? Things always
maybe
change.
Bitcoin does. Maybe.
I think for sure it's going to outlive all of us that are listening to this today.
I agree. I completely agree.
So, I mean, I talked about this with the Mooch, and I was like, I don't want to argue about things that my grandkids can argue with your grandkids about. But I mean, I think I see a world where when Bitcoin ultimately gets replaced, let's say there's like some hypothetical new technology, the social inertia will be to take the Bitcoin ledger and transplant it onto the new technology. So I think Bitcoin never dies if you care about the ledger. If the ownership ledger is what you're talking about, it literally would never die.
Yeah, sure. Agreed. What I'm talking about is really more trying to be technically correct than useful. I agree with you guys.
Well, I'm glad that I have both of you on the record saying that Bitcoin is designed to pump forever. So I appreciate that. So another reoccurring segment we have on this show is how would you kill Bitcoin? And I had Wiz on the show last week, and he asked me to define kill and Bitcoin. So I'm going to change it, the wording, and I'm going to ask you, if you are the most powerful governments in the world, so let's say you're U.S. or China, or we'll just throw Russia in there, whatever, fuck it. You're one of those three governments. You want to stop Bitcoin. How do you stop Bitcoin? We will start with Eco. Go.
Goddamn, good question. I would initiate a very elaborate media campaign of very rich and in the spotlight CEOs to start acquiring Bitcoin and to get as many people rallied around it as possible. And then once everyone is brainwashed by what these CEOs are saying to them and talking about NGU, then I would tell the CEOs that they need to hand over their Bitcoin in a 6102 style order and get those CEOs to tell all the sheeple that have been following them that that giving the government custody is a good thing for Bitcoin, and that this is how we quote unquote achieve world reserve status, and the crowds cheer themselves on into a cage, and then I don't know, maybe start requiring social security numbers and op return, and get someone to infiltrate the Bitcoin core devs to have that rolled into it, and then who knows where it goes from there. But yeah, I'm kind of alluding to the fact that I think some of this might be in play already with Michael Saylor and Elon Musk, and I think there's some dangerous memes out there. I think number go up is a very dangerous meme. I think this Trojan horse idea is a dangerous meme, and I think people really need to proceed with caution, and they need to understand their trade-offs, and they need to weigh their options, and they need to be very careful how they move forward, and they need to keep their identities out of it and go non-KYC and make every spend a coin join.
That was a really good
I
answer. I'm not sure I can top that, to be honest, or actually add much to it. I would be much more brief and say the best way to do it is to adopt, infiltrate, and subvert, which is basically what Eco just said in a much better way. I do think it can be done. There are not that many individuals. In fact, I was really surprised at how small the community actually is. You know, it appears from the outside, maybe not to everyone, but it appears to be quite large, and maybe it's growing at a pace. But it's if you get into it, and you know the people who are building and you know adding, and I mean by that I certainly include the content, you know, producers as well. It's not that many people on a global level, and yeah, it does worry me a little bit. But so long as we all do our work, I think, you know, we are winning. But I don't think we should be unaware of the risks of that kind of model that Eco just put forward. I think it is a very possible outcome if we don't keep on pushing self-custody, non-KYC, and basically just trying to make it as difficult to analyze the Bitcoin blockchain as we can. So that's my thoughts.
The whole value prop of Bitcoin is censorship resistance. So if you have significant stake in Bitcoin and you hold a large amount of Bitcoin, you better fucking be fighting for that censorship resistance. Like if you're not fighting for that censorship resistance, you are short yourself. And why would you ever live a life where you're short yourself? That is just dumb. That is just stupid. And you should fucking rectify that. You just start fucking fighting for yourself. And we need to all fight together. Like we need to just practice personal responsibility. The more people that are practicing personal responsibility and taking action into their own hands, the more censorship resistant the whole system is, and the farther we go. This is hilarious. A bunch of people have just decided that Craig Raw is Craig Wright. So we have a bunch of people in here going with the CSW meme. He can go fuck himself. CSW would never be on this podcast. So you can just let that be known. You fucking freaks.
I just want to be on the record saying, fuck Craig Wright.
100%. You're on the record now. I agree with you. Craig, do you want to be on the record as well to tell them to fuck CSW?
Absolutely. I distance myself from the other Craig.
Before we end, like I want to talk Eco. I want to talk about Greta's Fury a little bit. You want to show that to us,
dude? Yeah. So Bitcoin Enemies, check him out on Twitter, or I believe his URL is bitcoinenemies.com. He hosted Greta's Fury, or he organized it, and it was this idea to use the stowaway transactions and your paynims to pass one sat torch. So there's a couple of cool things here. One is it's demonstrating that you can send micro payments without using Lightning. You know, the one downside to this is that you're spending way more miners fees than you're actually transacting. But it's just a cool concept that you could send one sat to somebody if you'd like to. And you can also do that in a way that is breaking those common ownership input heuristics. And that was kind of the whole point of Greta's Fury, is to get people off the sidelines, get them curious about these tools, get them to use these tools. There was multiple channels set up on Matrix and on Telegram for anyone who is curious about the event to find a place where they could get some guidance if they had never done a stowaway transaction before. So it was great to see a lot of new people trying this stuff out for the first time in a fun way that really polluted the transaction graph.
I mean, that's fucking awesome, right? Like that's what we want. I would just advocate for people who participate to just be careful about what they're polluting it with. Just do not dox yourself. Just make sure those are they ideally should be post mix transactions. I mean, ideally non KYC, but if they are KYC, at least post mix KYC before you participate in any of those types of situations. But I 100% support it. I think it's kind of funny that you're calling it Greta's Fury. And
I can't take credit for that name. That's all Bitcoin enemies. I love the name
I don't know
too.
who I don't know who that guy is, but he's been fucking killing it. He's been on a fucking roll. He self-hosts everything, Mr.
Right.
Bitcoin Enemies, and he's going to be on this podcast sometime soon because anyone who self-hosts is a friend of mine. But he's just been fucking killing it. He's been fucking killing it, and I know he has a plural, but let's be honest, like when names have plurals, it just means it's a single dude behind it. Yeah, it's a really cool concept. I mean, I think everyone should use Samurai Wallet. I think it's a very useful spending wallet if you're spending on chain. I think if you're not spending on chain, then you should spend Lightning. So like you do one or the other. But if you do spend on chain, you should use Samurai Wallet. And if you want to do CoinJoin, you should use Whirlpool is my favorite. Or you can use Joan Market, but let's be honest, like you probably won't. And if you don't, you should use Samurai. So I mean, we're 2.5 hours in. I want to have both of you back on in the future. I'm trying to talk about. Let's see, where do I want to hit? I still have you. While I still have you, what do I want to hit? Mining. I want to talk eco. I want to talk about mining. I don't know if Craig has an opinion on this or not. Eco is decided to take over from Diverter, who is also on Citadel Dispatch. High signal, low noise. KYC free Bitcoin accumulation via mining. Eco tried to do this and then realized it's loud as fuck. And then tried to build an enclosure to make it quieter. You want to talk about that experience, like to the freaks who are thinking about basically stacking sats via KYC free mining?
Yeah, dude. I really believe the narratives around mining is for big players. It's not profitable. It's only going to work if you can get electricity for 1 cent a kilowatt hour. And it wasn't until November of last year that I read Diverter's Mining for the Streets guide. And after reading that, it really turned a light bulb on, and I saw potential for how that might actually work. So I crunched some numbers and I decided to give it a shot. And I documented everything my entire experience from start to finish. I documented that all in my guide. I'll be presenting that at Bear Arms and Bitcoin in Austin, Texas in April. And I decided to dive in and go for it. And I got a WhatsMiner M31S Plus, fired it up, and this thing is a fucking powerhouse. It puts out like 148 degrees Fahrenheit in heat, and it was like 85 decibels when you're standing next to the thing. Now, I've got I'm married, I have kids. My miner was being installed in the room directly below my kids' room, so I had to find some way to contain this powerhouse that I just introduced into our living space. And so I designed an enclosure out of easy materials to procure. I got everything at Home Depot, made an enclosure for it, put in some infrastructure for the ventilation. And yeah, that miner has been running nonstop for like the last 30 days now. I just got it fired up about a month ago. And we are generating a constant stream of non-KYC sats. And because the price is getting so, because the price is outpacing the hash rate, This is looking like I may have my initial return on investment for procuring the hardware paid off in less than 90 days. So I think my timing was really good because I started this when Bitcoin was trading around $18,000. And since then, the price of hardware has gone up with the price of Bitcoin. But even that being said, I think anyone who's interested should still take a serious look at it. Check out my home mining guide. I put every detail I could possibly think of in there. There's a ton of resources. There's a lot of great groups on Telegram you can look at. There's a lot of great mining calculators you can use to figure out if your unique situation is going to pay off. Blockware Solutions does hosted mining. If you can't bring that kind of equipment into your living space, you can still buy a piece of equipment and have it hosted somewhere else and get that steady stream of Bitcoin. So I'm very happy that I decided to go down that path. I know a few people have read my guide and read Diverter's guide, and they've messaged me to let me know that they've started down the path as well. So it's great to see that happening. And I think it's going to be important for more people to mine at home for their own safety and for the decentralization of the network. So it's been a great experience.
To be clear here, like, I mean, if I'm going to start talking numbers, right? Like, I would be happy to lose, 20% under what I would buy from a KYC exchange, right? To have non-KYC Bitcoin, or 40%. I would probably, I mean, I'm high. I would go 50%. Fuck it. If I could get KYC free Bitcoin for a 50% premium, I can do that shit. That's fucking valuable as fuck.
Well, dude, here's the thing. Like, I've been, for the last month, in these current market conditions, I'm generating non-KYC Bitcoin at nearly 60% below market price. Not for a premium, but like 60% below market price. Like, I'm generating like $30 worth of Bitcoin a day for $10 worth of electricity.
I really?
Yeah.
I don't believe you. But dude, if you say so, you're on stage. I'm not gonna counter you, but
when I get my electric bill, I'm gonna post the results for my first month online. And yeah, I'm generating non-KYC for nearly 60% below market price.
Do you know what your kilowatt per hours are by you?
12 cents.
Okay. I mean that's half of New York City.
Yeah, New York City. Sorry to hear that.
Yeah, I mean that's the least of our problems.
But even at 24 cents a kilowatt hour, you can use that Brains mining calculator. You may still be profitable. It'll just take you a lot longer to get your return on your initial hardware investment. But
profitability is a mindset. People are fucking ridiculous. Like, non-KYC Bitcoin is worth it. It doesn't matter what price you pay. Like, you can pay if you pay 100% premium, Bitcoin will pump past that. Like, if people think like $100,000 Bitcoin is the top, fuck you. You're short Bitcoin. You're wrong. Like we can argue about that now, and I'm not going to argue about it because in the future we will pass it, and then I will be right. Like, I don't need to argue with you about that. But that's the case. Historically, it's been the case, and I think in the future it will be the case. So I think people should just not worry about that aspect, and they should just get hardware and just fucking make it happen. But the biggest issue is sound. And you've done a bunch of good posts about the enclosures to try and like keep that sound away, right?
Yeah, it's all in my guide on my blog.
I was gonna post that. I was gonna post videos of you showing the enclosure directly in this episode, but I figured the people that were just listening via the podcast would just like not appreciate that at all. And like, I'm not just gonna put ASIC sounds into you while you can't see him. He literally he made an enclosure and then he put like a decibel counter in front of the enclosure and held it there for the video so people could see that he decreased the sound. It's still annoying. Let's be honest. It's still annoying. Like really, best case scenario is you have like a garage you can put it in where like no one ever goes into that garage that's detached from your house. Like it's annoying fucking sound.
It is. Yeah, it is annoying. But it's manageable. It can be managed.
Yeah, and you're mining the most scarce asset that has ever existed. It's fucking Bitcoin.
Right.
Craig, you have any opinions here on mining? Do you have any? Have you been exposed to mining at all?
I haven't. I actually read Eco's article, and I thought it was great. I really just enjoyed the build, and yeah, appreciated the work that went into it. I guess I have a question. You know, do you guys think that we're in the sort of almost the golden age of mining before the rewards drop, or do you think that the fee market is going to fully supplant the current rewards?
I mean, I'll let Eco respond after me. I actually think the opposite. I think we're kind of in the world where warehouse mining makes the most sense, and I think we're going to enter the world where ASICs last way longer than they do right now, and you will have a world where like people will just use their water heater. Their water heater will be a Bitcoin miner will be heating that, and they'll be getting extra Bitcoin from it, where their electric heater will be getting extra Bitcoin from it, and it'll have all these different mechanisms where they're like it'll redistribute, where you'll have diseconomies of scale, where this idea that if the ASICs last long enough, really the argument is, can you secure that waste energy, and that waste energy is the heat that gets released. Can that heat be reused? And if that heat can be reused, then all of a sudden you're talking major diseconomies of scale. You're talking houses, buildings, apartments, offices. They're all going to have Bitcoin miners that are also heating shit, and no one can compete with that, and it'll distribute out.
Yeah, you know, if we look at previous epochs in Bitcoin, you know, it went from 50 to 25 and it keeps getting cut in half, but mining continues to make sense in every epoch. And I think that's not going to change going forward. I think it'll continue to make sense. You know, I don't know if that's because the fees go up or if it's just because the value of Bitcoin is so much that it offsets the electrical costs and it's still worth it. But I think somehow it'll find a way, and mining will continue to make sense far into the future.
Do you think hash rate just keeps going up, or do you think we level off, or do we drop at some point? I'm curious.
Yeah, you know, like Matt was saying, if you got every apartment building out there using ASICs to run the hot water, and yeah, I think hash rate is going to continue to go up as well. The major problem we're having right now, I think, is that you don't have that many great ASIC manufacturers, and I think that's kind of creating a bottleneck. So you've got WhatsMiner or BTC. What's the company's name? MicroBT is the company behind the WhatsMiner, and then you've got Bitmain. And there's not a whole lot of other big fish out there. So yeah, I think the hash rate will continue to grow, but there needs to be more ASIC manufacturers supplying that demand. And until the hash rate grows, I think the price will continue to outpace it, and the next few years are going to be very good years for mining Bitcoin.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't matter. You mine the Bitcoin, you buy the Bitcoin. Like, we're gonna all of us are gonna be winners. It's gonna be very good. Don't let these short price movements fucking dictate any kind of attitude here. We continue to win, guys. We continue to win. All the Citadels are receiving this. They think they have us. They think they have us with this bullshit price decrease. But we sit at $48,000 Bitcoin. Like, fuck you. Like we will win. To all the freaks here on the live chat, thank you for joining us. This is why we Bitcoin. Bitcoin Tuesdays are what it's about. To Craig Raw and Ecana Alchemist, thank you for joining us. I mean, you guys are going to come back in the future. I would love to have you guys in the future. We're going to have so many good conversations. Craig, we got to take your podcast virginity. I appreciate that. That's at Craig Raw, CRAIGRAW, and Econa Alchemist is ECONOALCHEMIST. Go follow them. Make that fucking happen. Go follow Citadel Dispatch, like and subscribe, all the bullshit. I don't fucking do that shit. And let's stay humble and stack sats. Craig, do you have any last comments?
Yeah, I just want to give a shout out to El Mouton, who's doing her first PR review club in about 12 hours or so. Really great to see young new people coming into the space, and yeah, I'm keen to see how that one goes.
Eco, hit us.
If you're out there and you're trying to get involved with the Bitcoin space and you're not sure what kind of project to work on, maybe you're not a developer, maybe you're not a coder, we need people focusing on more non-KYC on-ramps. And if you want to do something that's worthwhile in Bitcoin, I think that area needs a lot of work and it needs a lot of support. And I think it would be very fruitful of anyone out there who wants to get involved in the space to start thinking about how they can provide non-KYC on-ramps.
100%. Tell the freaks out there, I have a Mount Gox stream tomorrow about the anniversary of Mount Gox. It's going to be all about self-custody. I'd appreciate your support over there for that. Retweets, likes, all that shit is super valuable. And just like participation, like just come into the comments. Let's have a fucking fun time with it. We're going to let's show the noobs why self-custody is important. I'm trying to fucking do a show over there. That's the whole point of being an advisor at Bitcoin Magazine. The second whole point of being an advisor at Bitcoin Magazine is I'm going to throw a fucking insane 200K party for all those involved in Miami in June 4th through 5th. The only fucking discount code that will give you a 21% discount is humble, all caps. And that's my discount code. I fucking negotiated that for you motherfuckers. I'm not making any money off of that. That's the only reason I'm fine with the ref link. I disagree with all ref links, but as long as all the money goes to you guys, I'm fucking fine with it. Catan and Ministry of Nodes. If you need support, you should go to ministryofnodes.com. They will give you support. They are not sponsoring it. They're my boys. Okay. In RHR last week, I said $60 to $70. I fucking sold them short. It's a value to value model. If you guys do not pay them more than $150, they're fucking going to stop the service. Like, you got to make that happen. Like, show them some love. Honestly, million sats, bare minimum. That's how it should be. 1 million sats. You give them less than 1 million sats, you don't love them. Make that happen. Give them some love. I do really feel bad about short selling them last week on that. So, like, please make sure that happens. Like, be good about that. And I will see you tomorrow for the Mount Gox stream. I will see you Thursday for RHR. It's going to be fucking lit as fuck. I love all of you freaks. Stay humble and stack sats.
Thank you, Matt.
Cheers, Matt.
Love you, freaks. Stay humble. Stack sats. I'll see you tomorrow and Thursday for our HR.